Okay, we're good to go. Good evening. Welcome to the Costa Mesa Planning Commission meeting for Monday, December 9th, 2019. I call the meeting to order and ask Commissioner Perkins to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you, Commissioner Perkins. Julie, roll call, please.
Chair DeErkel.
Here.
Vice Chair Harlan.
Here.
Commissioner Colbert.
Present.
Commissioner Perkins.
Here.
Commissioner Russell. Here. Commissioner Torje absent, and Commissioner Zick.
Here.
Thank you, Julie. We have no announcements and presentations tonight, which brings us to public comment. To ensure fair and equal treatment of all who appear before the Planning Commission and to expedite city business, speakers may be limited to 3 minutes during public comment to speak on any item within the Planning Commission's jurisdiction, which is not listed on the agenda this evening. This time may be extended for good cause by the chair or by a majority vote of the Planning Commission. Is there anyone wishing to speak during public comment tonight? Yes, ma'am.
Flo Martin, 52-year resident of Costa Mesa. I'm speaking as an individual, but I'd like to say that I have been on the Bikeway and Walkability Committee for the last 6 years, ever since it was started. I always find out via the grapevine when a street is being resurfaced or has already been resurfaced. Park Street comes to mind, recently resurfaced. I had hopes that there would be a bike lane, and when I saw the final lining of the street, all the markings and lanes, I was saddened to see there was no bike lane in either direction from 19th to 18th Street. Even though there's a new library there and lots of people on bikes. I found out recently that the city will be installing a bike rack on Park. My first thought was, no bike lanes. I found out this last week that California Street is being resurfaced in certain sections. I went to Google Earth and saw that California Street is missing some bike lanes. And I'm hoping that the city will install or line the missing bike lanes in that resurfaced area. I'm also requesting that staff provide information on all streets that will be resurfaced to the Bikeway and Walkability Committee so that we, the Bikeway and Walkability Committee, can provide input on how the street will be relined. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Rosales, can we provide that information to the Bikeway and Walkability Committee? Okay, that would be great if we could report to them. That would be awesome. Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
So it's fun to come over here and see all the lights. I really appreciate all the people that decorate. That has nothing to do with planning, but it's nice. Anyway, or maybe it does. You have to plan your lights. So they say location is everything and timing is everything. Okay, so I find it very peculiar that the day after Thanksgiving, I get a card in the mail about a property on East 20th Street from Willa, who has slipped through another crazy thing. The house at 413 East 20th Street, they want to put, it was supposed to be a 2-car garage with a storage thing, with a wall there, so it would be a storage. Oh no, now they're gonna open it all up, and I don't know if the Planning Commission is aware of this, and I'll probably get sued for saying it, but this property had a sober living situation going on before they rebuilt this house. So you know what happens when they take these walls out? They become the recreation room, the meeting room. There's 3 structures on the property, and I would really appreciate it if a planning commissioner would just pull it up so we could look at it. And also, there was some hanky-panky with the plumbing, and they broke lines, and I just want to know how many variances that property got. It is so oversized for that neighborhood. It is so outrageous. I just wish a planning commissioner would do it so the residents don't have to pay the money and do it. And also, I find the timing very peculiar that here we go again. Small lot ordinance right before Christmas. Sober living ordinance that only allowed R1 neighborhoods to be protected right before Christmas. Now you want to do cell phone tower things right before Christmas. People are busy. They might be distracted. They might not be paying attention. I'm calling foul.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak during public comment? Okay, seeing none, I'll close public comment. And brings us to planning commissioner comments and suggestions. Commissioner Zick, do you have any comments tonight?
I don't have any comments other than a question that I now have based on the last comment. Could staff help me? Was this a recent zoning administrator approval? I may have missed it if it was.
Ms. Lee.
If you'll give me a moment, I'll pull up the most recent zoning administrator decision.
Okay, thank you.
Go down. Meantime, Commissioner Perkins.
Oh yeah, just have a couple of quick comments. I was able to attend the groundbreaking of the Language Arts and Behavioral Science, Social Sciences building at Orange Coast College recently. It should be a fantastic building. This Sunday, we will be having the City of Costa Mesa will be having their annual or monthly, third Sunday ride, and the theme of this ride is going to be delivering cookies to all the fire and police stations in the city. I just helped Arliss Reynolds test ride it over the past Sunday. Should be a fantastic ride. It is open to everyone. We have a 2-mile option for family, which will be all off street. So if you want to bring little kids on that, that's perfect. We'll hit 1 fire station and police station. We'll have a 9-mile ride and then a 19-mile ride. So hope you can come to that. As a point of interest, I also, over Black Friday, rode my bike around to a bunch of parking lots, and Black Friday, of course, the busiest shopping day of the year, and went to Target, went to SoCo, went to IKEA, went to South Coast Plaza, and interestingly, still found open parking spaces at all of those. So it was sort of an interesting thought exercise on parking requirements. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Russell.
Yes, last week I was able to attend part of the Strong Towns Conference in Santa Ana, thanks to Councilwoman Reynolds. And I have to say, on Friday, Costa Mesa was well represented. Out of the 21 people that were there, 10 of them were from Costa Mesa, including Councilwoman Marr, Councilwoman Reynolds, a good portion of the Bike and Walkability Committee. So I think that it was a real good opportunity for us to look at how we can have some impact on our community. So I want to thank all of the residents that came out to participate. Thank you.
Commissioner Colbert.
I have no comments tonight.
Okay. Vice Chair Harlan.
Nothing tonight.
Okay. Do we have an answer for Commissioner Zick, Ms. Lee?
I'm looking online at the zoning administrator decisions of December 5th and also the prior one of November 21st. If I got the address right, it's 420 East 20th. That address is not on either of those decision letters, so unless it's coming up at the next zoning administrator decision, which is on December 12th, it's not yet been decided upon. The only other, go ahead.
413?
413. It's on 20th, though, right?
East 20th. Yeah.
Yes, nothing on the 20th Street on either one of those decision dates. I'm happy to look this up. If we have a specific date that the zoning administrator made the decision, then I can provide a little more clarity.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much. Just a quick comment about the Walkway and Bikeability Committee, which I think is a terrific group that's been doing great work, particularly with the Bikeway and Walkability Master Plan that was done. I think Planning Commission looked at it either earlier this year or last year. I can't remember. At any rate, I want to make sure that the committee really stays active, and I know they will because I know a lot of the people on there, as we get into our housing element. Because as we start looking at potential upzoning of properties, that the integration of active transportation in those kind of concepts is going to be very important. So we're going to need the committee's input, and I would strongly encourage that the staff, the city council, and certainly the planning commission, as we look at the housing element in this next cycle, really plug into that committee and have them participate in a meaningful way. Beyond that, those are all the comments I have tonight. We have no consent calendar items.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, ma'am.
if I could just provide a little more clarification. That project is listed, it was published. The decision has not been made yet. The decision date is December 12th.
Okay, thank you very much for that update. And just, Ms. Parker, so you know, if a commission wants to call it up after the zoning administrator makes a decision, then that can certainly happen. The decision hasn't been made yet.
I thought we only had to December 12th to pull it up.
Ms. Lee?
The decision date is December 12th for the zoning administrator decision. The commission or member of the council have 7 days following the decision to pull it up for review,
Thank
or
you.
a member of the
Thank
public
you.
to appeal.
So, Ms. Parker, the zoning administrator has not made a decision on that application yet.
That's not what I received in the mail.
I'm just telling you what the staff is reporting out to me. Thank you. All right, ma'am, I'm sorry. I'm letting you know what I've been told by the staff. Thank you. Okay. This brings us to public hearing item number 1. Julie, could you please read that?
Public hearing item number 1, a resolution recommending that the City Council give first reading to an ordinance, Code Amendment CO-19-04, amending Title 19 and Title 13 of the Costa Mesa Municipal Code, franchises and planning, zoning, and development, relating to wireless telecommunication facilities and related infrastructure within the public right-of-way.
Okay. So what I'd like to do is have Mr. Porter or Mr. Preziosi provide kind of a laying of the ground rules of how we're going to run this public hearing and what the commission can and can't consider. So, Mr. Preziosi.
Thank you. So
Mr. Porter,
I'm
sorry.
Scott Porter. I'm a deputy city attorney. One item that I would like to remind the city council and the public about is that federal law prohibits the city from establishing any regulations on wireless facilities based on the health effects of radio frequency emissions to the extent that the proposed wireless facility complies with federal RF emission standards. What the proposed ordinance before the city council, before the planning commission does do is it establishes a number of rules to ensure that proposed wireless facilities actually do comply with federal law, and both, before installation and post installation. So my request and recommendation to the city, to the members of the public that wish to address the planning commission would be to encourage the public to talk about those items that the Planning Commission actually does have jurisdiction over. And certainly I understand there's concerns about health effects, so we should be focusing on the things that the city can regulate rather than the things that we cannot regulate. If the city has a link available on the city's website for individuals who would like to comment to the FCC about proposed revisions to the federal RF emission standards. If you want to search on the website for, I believe it's small cells. If you search for small cells, then that is one avenue to address those concerns, but certainly the commission will consider all public comments.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Porter. Ms. Lee, the floor is yours for the staff report.
Thank you, Chair and members of the Planning Commission. The item before you this evening is Code Amendment 19-04 regarding wireless facilities within the public right-of-way. Wireless installations throughout the city are not new. However, small cell wireless installations are relatively new as technology and consumer expectations have changed over time. The industry developed small cell technology and is working to deploy it nationwide in response to increased consumer demand for wireless services. These services accommodate increased consumer expectations for example, online streaming, multiple devices per person, automated cars, and the like. Small cell facilities, sometimes referred to as nodes, are typically placed on light poles, traffic signals, or new poles within public right-of-way. They are lower power, smaller scale facilities that supplement the larger macro cell facilities which have existed in the city for many years. In the way of background, in 2010, a telecommunications facility was installed on top of a wood pole within the city's right-of-way, located near the intersection of Tustin and 20th Street. At that time, there was no authority in the municipal code to review such facilities, and an encroachment permit was issued. Residents of the neighborhood expressed concerns, and as a result, the city adopted an ordinance requiring the equivalent of a minor conditional use permit for any proposed telecommunication facility that did not meet certain criteria. Since 2010, an MCUP has been processed to install a wireless facility within the public right-of-way if it meets any of the following criteria. 1, if a facility is located within 500 feet of a residential zoning district. 2, if the facility proposes an above-ground equipment cabinet. Or 3, if it includes an antenna or accessory equipment larger than certain specified criteria. The city regulates wireless facilities through its municipal code, but we do it under the umbrella of federal and state law. At the federal level, the FCC governs what local jurisdictions may consider in their review of small cell facilities. Per federal law, the city may not regulate the placement, construction, or modification of wireless service facilities in a manner that prohibits or effectively prohibits the provision of personal wireless services. However, the federal law does not prohibit the city from considering aesthetics and facility location so long as the criteria used to evaluate a facility are reasonable, non-discriminatory, objective, and published in advance. On January 1st, 2016, California Assembly Bill number 57 became effective, which provided that applications for co-location or siting of a wireless telecommunication facility could be automatically approved, or the equivalent if a city fails to approve or disapprove an application within 90 days for co-location applications and 150 days for a new wireless facility. These shot clocks, as they're commonly referred to, also apply to small cell facilities, though in a different way. In September 2018, the FCC adopted Order 18-133, which became fully effective in April of 2019. The main effects of those recent regulations were as follows. First, the shot clock deadlines to approve or reject the deployment of small cell facilities were shortened to 60 days for co-locations and 90 days for wireless facilities on new structures. In addition, the FCC included all processing, appeals, and permit issuance within the totality of the shot clock. Second, the FCC limited the application fees a city may charge to a reasonable approximation of actual costs, so long as those costs are reasonable. There is no set definition of what reasonable might mean, but the FCC indicated that a safe harbor for fees is $500 total for up to 5 applications and $100 for each application after that. The definition of co-location was also expanded to include new installations on existing structures, regardless of whether those structures already had existing wireless facilities on them. And lastly, the FCC prohibited local government aesthetic standards for small cell facilities unless they are reasonable, no more burdensome than those applied to other types of infrastructure deployments, are objective, and are published in advance. Regarding RF emissions, federal law prohibits local governments from regulating wireless facilities on the basis of perceived health effects of radio frequency emissions, commonly referred to as RF. The city requires an RF emissions analysis and report as part of our MCUP application for wireless facilities. The report is required to be prepared by a licensed engineer and to demonstrate compliance with FCC standards. The city also requires as a standard condition of approval for post-installation measurement and a report to confirm such compliance. This is part of our standard practice for how we process applications today. In addition to federal law, there is also pending legislation regarding wireless facilities. H.R. 530 and SB 2012 are being considered and state that the 2018 FCC ruling shall have no further force and effect. If passed, the legislation could roll back the FCC's 2018 ruling, which, as you may recall, primarily relates to shorter shot clocks and limited fees the city may charge. Costa Mesa signed on to the National League of Cities letter in support of the legislation. In addition, the 2018 FCC ruling is the subject of several local government lawsuits that are ongoing and being reviewed at the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. The city began receiving applications for small cell facilities in late 2017. At the time, the cities processed an MCUP under certain circumstances, but the municipal code itself otherwise did not contain any applications requirements or design criteria. As a result, the city received varying designs and configurations from the wireless carriers, with some examples shown on this slide to the right. In Costa Mesa, the majority of small cell facilities are being proposed on streetlight poles owned and operated by Southern California Edison. SCE and an individual carrier's technology dictate the designs of these facilities, which at the time resulted in a variety of small cell facility design. As a result, and in order to provide guidance and to ensure a degree of visual consistency and uniformity for wireless installations within the public right-of-way, staff began preparing design guidelines in early 2018 for Planning Commission and City Council consideration. On May 31st, 2018, the Planning Commission recommended approval of design guidelines to the City Council. On September 4th, 2018, the City Council held a public hearing on the issue, and at that meeting, cell carriers expressed an interest in meeting with staff to discuss their concerns regarding the design guidelines prior to the council's decision. The council continued the item to its October 2nd, 2018 meeting and requested staff have a stakeholders meeting with the carriers. Following that meeting, staff made changes to the design guidelines and presented the revised guidelines to the council. Those guidelines were adopted on October 2018. As I previously mentioned, FCC Order 18-33 became fully effective in April of 2019. The council amended the design guidelines in that same month to comply with the FCC's ruling with one minor text change. Additionally, City Council updated the siting section of the design guidelines and eliminated direct view criteria, replacing it with distance from residential as a determining factor for which decision-making body would review the application. Facilities proposed within 50 feet when located on an arterial or 75 feet when located on a local street of a residence in a residential zone would have been reviewed by the Planning Commission. If located further from a residence, the application would be reviewed by the zoning administrator. This standard replaced the prior criteria, which focused on whether a facility was within direct view of a residence or not. The council approved that modification to the design guidelines on April 2nd, 2019. On May 28th, 2019, the Planning Commission approved minor conditional use permits for 7 small cell facilities proposed by AT&T and Verizon. During the public hearing, residents expressed concern regarding RF emissions and aesthetics and economic impacts. Planning Commission expressed frustration at the process and its limited ability to address the residents' concerns due to federal law, but approved the facilities because they complied with the city's adopted design guidelines. The items were called up for council review. The reasons stated in that call-up were so that the council could consider aesthetics of those facilities, to educate the public on the limits of city discretion, to educate the council on the consequences of mandating Planning Commission review of small cell facilities, understanding that the Commission's discretion was very limited, and to consider alternative options and direction. The items called up for review were agendized for council for the July 2nd, 2019 meeting and were subsequently continued pending a council study session and community open house, which was directed by the council. The city held a study session and community open house on August 13th, 2019. 8 members of the public spoke and email correspondence was also received. Staff evaluated federal law and the design guidelines with the city attorney's office and consultant expert and advised the council that there was a potential to modify the design guidelines to include, for example, a locational hierarchy, a residential setback requirement, as well as alternatives to Southern California Edison poles that might provide a little more flexibility in design and location. The City Council requested staff return with modified design guidelines and evaluate a number of possibilities moving forward. This slide shows, in general, the items that the City Council expressed interest in staff following up on. I won't go through all of them individually, as we'll discuss them a bit more later in the presentation. This slide shows, in general, the summary of public comments that were received at the study session or shortly after. This is not an exhaustive list, but it hits some of the major points from the community. Following the study session, staff began working on revisions to the design guidelines with the understanding that implementing the council direction would take a multi-step effort. The first step in the process was revising the design guidelines. The second was to process a code amendment. And the third would be to update the city's website, materials, and internal practices to implement both the code and the design guidelines. The council approved the design guidelines on October 1st, 2019, and they incorporated guidelines specifically for preferred support structures, a preferred locational hierarchy, additional location standards, which are included in the design guidelines, as well as facility design requirements requiring a streamlined design. As such, step one of the process has been completed. Staff has pursued a code amendment, and that is the subject of this evening's hearing. As part of the design guidelines discussion, it became apparent that there are things that shouldn't be concluded in design guidelines that were more appropriate to address in the code itself. As such, council directed staff to move forward with a code amendment and expressed interest in addressing the following items. Specifically, they discussed the location of wireless facilities should not just disrupt the path of travel. They discussed the importance of maintaining views of public art and landscaping. That particular issue was addressed as part of the design guidelines. They had an interest in pursuing resident notification of future facility upgrades, an interest in ensuring that ministerial approvals were posted online, the requirement for a post-installation RF report, as well as a clause for reevaluation if there were any changes in federal law that the city should consider. The code amendment itself is also a three-step process. The proposed amendment to the city's code is first reviewed by Planning Commission. The Planning Commission's role is to provide a recommendation to the City Council. Following Planning Commission's recommendation, staff will agendize the code amendment for a first reading by City Council, including forwarding the Planning Commission's recommendation. And finally, there is a second reading of the ordinance after the first reading, and the new ordinance becomes effective 30 days after the second reading. This is the process for any code amendment. In terms of the specifics of the proposed code amendment being considered this evening, it modifies the city's existing regulations for wireless facilities in the public right-of-way, which are contained in Title 19. Specifically, the proposed code amendment would modify the review process. It also expands the codified application requirements and permit review criteria for wireless installations and incorporates standard conditions into the municipal code. In addition, it would modify Title 13 to include a cross-reference to Title 19 where applicable. This slide shows the existing review process. Essentially, it shows a process that follows the minor conditional use permit process, whereby the Planning Commission reviews certain MCUP applications if they're within certain distances of a residence in a residential zone. Discussed that previously in my presentation. The applications are reviewed by zoning administrator if they're further away from a residence than the specified distances, and if the application doesn't rise to the level of a minor conditional use permit, it is reviewed at the staff level, and an encroachment permit is issued as well. The proposed code amendment would modify the review process. First, it establishes that a wireless telecommunications use permit is required for new wireless installations. It establishes a staff-level ministerial approval process for small cell facilities if code requirements are met. That would be a director-level decision. Those decisions are posted online, and the decisions would be appealable to the city manager. It also establishes a discretionary review process for wireless telecommunications use permits for small cell facilities when code requirements are not met. In that case, there is a public notice that is sent 10 days prior to a decision. A 500-foot mailing radius for public notice would apply. Again, this is a director-level decision. The decisions are posted online and also appealable to the city manager. The proposed code amendment also codifies requirements for eligible facilities requests. In this case, an encroachment permit is required. The permits, when issued, are posted online. And also, the code amendment specifies application requirements and standard conditions that would apply to these eligible facilities requests, and those requirements include RF emissions reports. In addition, the proposed code amendment modifies application requirements. Specifically, it establishes that submittals can be by appointment only, and also requires RF emissions compliance reports, things like an acoustical analysis, a photometric analysis, and the like, as part of the application requirement for a wireless telecommunications use permit. The current ordinance, although it refers to the minor conditional use permit process, but it does not specify application requirements. The proposed code amendment also addresses review criteria, including consistency with location and the support structure hierarchy that was established in the design guidelines, compliance with placement standards, as well as the requirement that each facility meets code requirements and the design guidelines. The code amendment also includes standard conditions that would be applied to all permits. These include a requirement for post-installation certification, a requirement to ensure that equipment is underground, and also landscaping requirements. This code amendment was agendized for the November 25th, 2019 Planning Commission meeting. The item was continued without discussion to tonight's meeting, December 9th, 2019. This was to ensure that staff had an opportunity to review the public comments that were submitted. Based on public comments, staff proposed revisions to the ordinance, and those revisions are included in your staff report in track changes format so that you can see the changes since the ordinance was last before you in November. The changes focus on application materials and processes. For example, a photometric analysis was added to the application requirements. Some suggestions from the community to allow for concurrent review in order for staff to better be able to meet the shot clocks were included. We also made revisions to the ordinance that were suggested by the public to clarify the public notification process, just to make it more clear. We also expanded the post-installation certification condition to tie it back to the RF emissions compliance report. So those revisions are included as part of your staff report packet. A number of public comments were received since the November 25th notice. Approximately 24 comments were received prior to the staff report being published, and you have also received in your red folders this evening additional comments received since the publishing of that report. With that, staff recommends that the Planning Commission adopt a resolution to recommend the City Council find the proposed ordinance exempt from the California Environmental Quality Act, and also to adopt an ordinance modifying the municipal code with respect to wireless telecommunications facilities as shown in the staff report. That concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Lee, very much for the excellent presentation. Commissioners, are there any questions immediately for staff? Commissioner Zick.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You've come a long way with this process and this ordinance, and there's a lot in it, and I need your help finding out a couple of things. And I want to start with notices. And when I look on the staff report, page 6, and it's talking about the ministerial, so there's ministerial and there's discretionary. And in the paragraph where it's talking about ministerial, it makes a comment that it says it would not require a formal public notice. So my first part of my question is, if there's an application to establish a site on a pole and it's near my house and it satisfies the requirements of a ministerial approval, this is saying that essentially I wouldn't know about it until a decision was made approving it, and then I would find that on the city's website. Is that part correct?
That is correct for ministerial approvals. Ministerial approvals, by the way, are an approval that is essentially a staff level approval. It's if you meet the code requirements, then a project is approved. But you are required to meet the code requirements. It's very similar to, for example, an encroachment permit or a building permit where compliance is a straightforward matter. And in those cases, for example, building permit or encroachment permit, those are not noticed. Ministerial decisions in Costa Mesa are typically not noticed.
Okay. And then for the discretionary, those are noticed, the proposal of an installation that is up for a discretionary review. The notice of that review is what is noticed out to residents or to property owners within the 500 feet with 10 days?
Yes. This public notice procedure is also the same as for our other planning application discretionary approvals. The procedure would be at least 10 days prior to the decision. A notice would be mailed to property owners and occupants of all properties within 500 feet of the proposed wireless location.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. I then had a question, macro cells, that term is on the top of the staff report, page 7. What I was not able to find, and it may not be appropriate, which is why I couldn't find it, was a definition of macro cell in the definitions I guess start on handwritten page 28. And I don't know if having a definition in there would be appropriate or not.
So there is a definition of a small cell facility, and anything bigger than that is considered a macro cell or other type of facility. Macro cell maybe wasn't the right word to use in the staff report. It's essentially anything bigger than a small cell facility. It's commonly referred to as a macro cell, but it doesn't have to be.
Okay. Then I'm looking on staff report page 8 on this subject of 5G. So the first comment, just to pull it out of the report, is that you've not received any applications for 5G facilities to this point. In the middle of that page, it essentially says that under federal law, an upgrade to the existing small cell wireless facility from 4G to 5G that keeps the shrouded equipment concealed within the approved structure would only require an encroachment permit and could not be denied. My question about that is whether a change from 4G to 5G at an installation would or could trigger the testing requirement that we have for the installation of 4G equipment. And I wasn't able to find anything in the ordinance that spoke to that.
I will find a section if you'll give me a moment, but the change from 4G to 5G technology, at this point, the carriers have told us that they're just starting out on 5G designs, and Southern California Edison has indicated that they have not approved any 5G designs for Southern California Edison poles. Under the ordinance, an encroachment permit would be required for an eligible facilities request, which is what this is referred to when you're changing sort of components of a technology, but those changes are still being contained within an approved shroud. And that change under the ordinance would trigger compliance with specified application requirements and standard conditions of approval, and that would include an RF compliance report at the time of application. It would also include post-installation certification after installation. If you'll give me a moment, I'll find that page number for you.
Okay, do you want me to hold off on my next question until you do that?
It's in subsection D of the ordinance, which would be
Handwritten page for me?
roughly page 23. '26. It's under the heading eligible facilities exemption requests near the end of the paragraph. It cross-references the requirements to provide all the application materials listed in subsections B to G and B2I through B2M.
Okay. Good, thank you for that. Encroachment permit. Now I'm on handwritten page 7. And item B, near the top of that page, says, an encroachment permit and/or building permit may be required as applicable. But when I look at page 12, handwritten page 12, near the bottom under permits required, it says, any wireless telecommunication facility that is to be installed within the public right-of-way shall require an approval of a wireless telecommunications use permit and public right-of-way encroachment permit. So is there a reason why on page 7 it says may require an encroachment permit?
For an encroachment permit, any installation within the public right-of-way will require an encroachment permit. The may really has to do more with the applicability of the building code and the public right-of-way. We left it open to that possibility.
Okay. My next question starts really with handwritten page 28, item number 9. Handwritten page 28, item number 9. And this is a definition of director, which says that the director is either the Economic and Development Services Director or the director's designee. And then if I look at page 31, handwritten page 31, where it defines or describes the zoning administrator, it says that the Development Services Director or his designee is authorized to act as the zoning administrator. So I'm wondering if throughout this document, if the term director, his designee, and zoning administrator are interchangeable. And the reason why I have that question is because of the appeal process that is described for the ministerial and the discretionary. So if you could start by helping.
Yes. It's very common to use the words or designee in a code because it gives the city in the future, should its structure change, the ability to designate a person as opposed to it being specifically one person in the city. For example, if the director position was vacant, something like that. So it's very common to use that language, but for clarity, the director is intended to be the Economic and Development Services Director. The zoning administrator is a designated position within the city. At the moment, it's Willabau Colleen. So those are two very distinct positions.
So on handwritten page 13, where it is talking about the review criteria, and for the ministerial portion of the process, it specifically says director, makes no mention of designee, makes no mention of zoning administrator, and if by definition director could be designee, then I'm not sure I understand the distinction or in terms of how or where I would see these approvals on the city's website. In other words, is the zoning administrator ever going to be allowed to make the ministerial approvals? Will there be two different sections in the website where I would find the discretionary approvals that are done by the zoning administrator and the ministerial that are done by the director? It almost seems like hierarchically those roles are reversed, but if you could help me with that.
Sure. So ministerial approvals would only ever be the director. The zoning administrator for the proposed code amendment would make only decisions related to something that's not a small cell facility. There are two distinct decision makers. If you look on our website today, the zoning administrator decisions are posted online at a specific location. Also, other decisions sort of made by the department in general, which is director or designee decisions, have a distinct page on our website as well. So this is following the structure that's already in place for our existing planning application requirements.
Got it. Okay, thank you for that. I think that is it for my questions. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, staff.
Thank you, Commissioner Perkins, and then Commissioner Colbert.
Thank you very much. Excellent presentation. A couple of questions. One is on hand-numbered page 23, where we are looking at landscaping. It states that when a tree is damaged in response to installing a small cell facility, that it must be replaced with a tree that is substantially the same size as the damaged tree. Given that trees can be potentially very large or in areas that may not be even optimal to have a tree of a certain size, is that always practical or what we necessarily want to sort of obligate a certain replacement size there?
So it can always be, our intention with this section was, you can see the reference, for example, to Title 15. We have very specific requirements for procedure when trees are damaged or removed in Costa Mesa. They go through a review process. So the size of the tree is ultimately determined by that committee or that decision-making body. The idea here is just that we want it to be comparable. We probably could use different words in this section if we desired. We can take a closer look at that.
Okay. Thank you. Second thing that I was wondering about is just confirming that when we have this, and I think this is on page 24 in the underground equipment, but ensuring that when we're doing these installs of small cell facilities, we are ensuring that the public right-of-way is kept clear for, say, people on foot, for ADA, and for bicyclists and bike lanes. And I just wanted to confirm, is that in here?
Yes, so this is located in a couple of places, but the most obvious one is underground equipment, as you've said on handwritten page 24, it's subsection 18. It describes that no above-ground equipment is allowed in the public right-of-way. Our expectation is that any equipment be underground and that it be covered by a vault that's flush mount. The description of the vault, I believe, is in the design guidelines, but it's also referenced in the code.
Great. And then other one I had was actually, again, in the definitions, I believe, and this is actually more of, I think, a typographical thing, but one that might be a potential issue is page 30 in the definitions, hand-numbered page 30. Number 24, section E, is missing the word percent after 10, and that lack of units could be an issue. So increasing by more than 10%. Any of, I believe, is what probably is intended, and I wanted to make sure that got fixed.
Yes, thank you. We will make that change.
Thank you. And that's all my comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Colbert and then Vice Chair Harlan.
Thank you. My first two questions have been asked and answered. My next question is related to poll license agreement on handwritten page 11. I just have one question related to the poll licensing agreement related to, does the city own any polls within the city of Costa Mesa? And if so, are there any facilities being proposed on any of those polls?
The facilities that, the applications that we have received so far have been exclusively on Southern California Edison streetlights or on Joint Powers Authority-owned wood poles. The city does not own any streetlight poles. The city does own traffic signal poles and a number of other types that we have not received applications to locate on those facilities.
Okay, thank you. And then the second question is related to handwritten page 18, the permitting term, the permit term. I know the permits will automatically expire in 10 years. I'm just interested in how we will monitor that process, or who will be monitoring that process.
So the 10-year permit term, I believe, is a state requirement. Our attorney's office can correct me if I'm wrong. We have included that 10-year permit term as part of the conditions of approval for all minor conditional use permits that we've issued so far. So this would be sort of a continuation of that requirement. Moving forward, our intention is to have all of these facilities listed on the city's website, as well as a tracking system for expiration of those permit terms.
And to be clear, the 10-year rule, it's not a requirement per se. Rather, state law indicates that if the city requires revocation of a permit prior to 10 years, that revocation requirement is deemed unreasonable. Okay. Thus, we came up with 10 years.
Okay. And my final question, just for public record, is just to notice the expiration increase from 12 to 18 months. Handwritten page 57. Just can you explain the justification for the increase in that build-out period question?
Yes, looking at handwritten page 57 at section 5, build-out period. Originally, as part of our November 25th, 2019 ordinance, the wireless telecommunications use permit would have automatically expired after 12 months. We modified that to 18 months after some conversations with Southern California Edison. Typically, their review process and their design process for electrical purposes takes anywhere from 9 to 12 months. As a result, we increased this so that carriers would have the opportunity to meet the expiration deadlines. We felt that 18 months was appropriate given that design timeline for Southern California Edison.
Okay, thank you. No more questions.
Thank you. Ms. Rosales, did you have a clarification on, I believe, Ms. Lee's answer to Commissioner Colbert's question about facility ownership?
Yes, thank you, Planning Commissioners. Just a quick clarification on the street light pole question. SE does own the majority of street light poles. However, the city does own just a small number of decorative street light poles in the Triangle area.
Okay. Vice Chair Harlan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just have two questions. One, I understand that the City Council approved the design guidelines. Was that by ordinance or by resolution?
It was by resolution.
Okay, so they're technically not part of the code, but as part of our consideration of the ordinance, we may in fact suggest that it become approved by ordinance, correct?
They are referenced in the code, and please.
Absolutely right. So our existing municipal code does authorize the City Council to adopt these by resolution, but if you wish to include it in a resolution, in the ordinance itself, that would be certainly reasonable, and we can provide some language that would accomplish that end.
Okay, good. And secondly, I just want to get a little context for the volume of applications we anticipate. So do you have a sense of, from the industry what we are looking at as far as numbers, let's say in the first year? And if you don't, that's fine, but I want us to get a sense too of what that might look like.
So far, the city has received approximately 60 applications for small wireless facilities. In speaking to carriers, they don't have an exact number. We've tried to get more information a number of times. Essentially, the number that they refer to is sort of hundreds over the next few years.
Okay. And so for comparison's sake, how many planning applications do we receive in a year, and then roughly building permits issued?
That
Sorry.
is a good question. I'm going to need to look at my notes and get back to you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I will open the public hearing and public comment portion of the public hearing and ask if there are any members who wish to speak to this item. Please come down to either one of the podiums. I would remind the audience and also the commissioners again that our job here tonight is to review the draft ordinance before us. I know there's a lot of opinion about RF, but we're not here to consider those things tonight. We're here to consider the ordinance as it is presented to us, and only that. So I just wanted to kind of remind the public of that. You're certainly free to speak to the matter as you wish, but I just wanted to give you that reminder. So please come forward to either one of the podiums if you have public comments tonight. And if you wouldn't mind, state your name and address for the record. You don't have to, but it helps Julie out in putting the minutes together. Yes, sir.
Good evening and Merry Christmas. My name is Ray Wallace. I own the property.
Oh, sorry, sir, I'm sorry, your mic's not on, and I'm restarting you. There you go.
Merry Christmas. I own the property at 1541 Wintergreen in the Spice Streets, and you were going to authorize a pole about 16 or 17 feet from the building. And we still haven't gotten any definitive what's happening with that. And so we would greatly appreciate if this new, whatever you're doing, is going to eliminate it or include it. I find that the footage distance from a building is kind of strange when your original paperwork was saying 500 feet and 100 feet, and all of a sudden now you're down to 25 feet. And I would really appreciate if you would all look at that and at least give a skosh more. The vice chair had talked about applications, and I thought that was really interesting because if somebody has an appointment for an application, does that mean that planning can say, oh, we're full this week, you guys can't come in this week? How does that process work? Because if you have shot clocks and they're bringing you a valid application, and along with that, I would think that by having a master plan, even if they give you a swag, scientific wild ass guess, at least you'd have some kind of inference of the different entities and how many places they're looking at putting and where, because that really is going to impact your neighborhoods. And for an example, just removing a pole and installing a new pole, it could be 4 weeks, it could be 10 weeks, it could be all tore up. What mitigation are you going to do for that? The cell phone company should not be able to trade locations. If they've got an approved site on site A, they can't go to another provider and ask, hey, I'll trade you this one for that one. They should have to start all over. And there's nothing in there to prohibit them. And I suspect that some of them are going to do that. The ADA, I think that you owe the citizens some better verification for ADA and this environmental impact study or code that you're being asked to waive. And lastly, property owners have fixed their right-of-ways, and you have no provision in there truly to say to Mr. Property Owner, we're going to fix it back up like it was. They've maintained that even though you have the right-of-way. Sorry, thank you, and Merry Christmas.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Jennifer Smith, 10-year Costa Mesa resident on the west side off of 17th Street. It is the first time that I've been at one of these regarding the cell tower. And I'm just wondering why liberty and freedom and justice for all, if we cannot address health effects, if we cannot, then why are we not using loopholes that were cited earlier, like changing out components, yes, we understand businesses want this from our people, but what do our people want? Yes, we understand you want to put 200 of these things, hundreds of these things, but we only want 10. I mean, first, you may not want to address the health concerns because the FCC tells you that you can't, but who is going to speak on behalf of children, on behalf of animals? And it's kind of strange, don't you think? I mean, can't we say we don't want this? We don't want what you're selling us? Why can't we? I don't really understand. And I am in a health profession. I do think the health matters. I'm 59 years old. I plan to live another 30 or 40 years. However, if I am constantly gobbling supplements to keep myself from being neurotic because of these health effects of this 5G, you guys may want to look the other way, but I do not. And that's why I came to this meeting. I'm very tired right now. I get up like 5 o'clock every day. Maybe you guys are tired too, but and I'm trying to use my 3 minutes because surely this is important. It is important that just because the feds tell us we have to do something doesn't mean we have to do it. Can we not find a way to say we don't want to and tell them a different reason? We don't want to because we don't like it. And if it's aesthetics, just say we don't want that little thing on that pole. Aesthetics. Find a reason why the aesthetics are no good. I mean, this is really strange, and this is our future, and it's here, and it stinks.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am, you're next. Good evening. Oh, hold on. There you go.
Oh, okay, thank you. My name is Susie. I live in Huntington Beach, and I have been fighting this particular application that was located right next to my home. It basically has infected my whole entire piece of property. I submitted a report to the council here in Costa Mesa at the last council meeting, and was gave my report to the mayor. And I have been living with these extreme measures of radiation on my whole entire piece of property. It got turned on in July, and so I have been living with 6 months of radiation infecting my property. I can't even enjoy my backyard. I run into my house. It's in my house. I've been having problems I know you don't want to talk about health, but it is because of the microwave radiation, how a microwave radiation oven works. It sucks the water out of your body. It started creating pain in both my elbows, in my wrists, and it's been dehydrating my skin for 6 months. I finally had to go to Home Depot and get 2 rolls of aluminum screen, and I have been sleeping underneath an aluminum screen since early October. And it has helped, but I shouldn't have to live like this. This technology goes inside your home. It goes in through the windows and the walls. You can't turn it off. You can't get away from it. I am lucky because I'm getting mine removed. It's being removed in the next 2 weeks. I've had to work diligently with our city council members and our mayor in the city of Huntington Beach. And this technology is absolutely ludicrous. It's not even needed. We have the fiber optic in the ground. And you guys need to find out how much fiber optic that you have that's supplying the city, and also how much dark fiber that you have that's been installed that you're not even using. Fiber optic is the way to go. It's safe, it's secure, it can't be cyber attacked. This whole 4G, 5G, I'm hoping it's going to absolutely fail when it goes to the 9th Circuit and gets vacated to cease and desist, because this is absolutely ludicrous what is going on in the state of California when we paid for fiber optic to be installed in our home.
Thank you, ma'am. Yes.
Flo Martin, Costa Mesa. I can actually see from my bedroom window a small cell facility. I can see that facility from my front yard and also from the sidewalk in front of my home. I was not notified that that facility was going to be installed, and I strongly urge that staff and anyone else involved with regulating the proposed facilities that the neighborhood be informed as per what the stipulations will be. 500 feet, all neighbors need to be notified before that installation is placed. About 3 nights ago, I read an article in my Time magazine that curled my teeth and curdled my blood. And I highly recommend everyone in the audience, everyone listening on TV or watching on TV, and all of you on the dais and staff to read this article. It's entitled, "The Entire System is Designed to Oppress Us, to Suppress Us, What the Chinese Surveillance State Means for the Rest of the World." I repeat, the entire system is designed to suppress us, what the Chinese surveillance state means for the rest of the world. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
I'm Marcia Hoyce. I'm from Huntington Beach. This technology is killer technology. It's bad for our health. It's not designed to be good for us. You're here to protect your public. Do you want this by your homes? I don't think so. If it comes down to, well, we can't talk about health, that's ridiculous. I'm sorry. Is it better, you say, well, we'll get sued. Get sued or kill people in your audience here or in your city or drive them to bad disease and early death. Think about children, pregnant women, pets, all living things. Seniors, are you going to go and ask them who lives in their homes, oh, do you have a compromised immune system? Or do you have a pregnant mother here? Are you going to ask those questions or take a poll? I go around with this meter every place I go to see how much radiation is around. Not one cell tower or one small cell in my city or any place I see is in FCC compliance. They're all too high. They are all too high. I haven't found one. And I read that it's 580 microwatts per meter squared. This is higher every time I get near one. And I'm not even close to the people's homes. I'm 200 feet away or so. I hate to think what's going into people's homes. Please keep these out of neighborhoods, away from your home and everybody else's home and school, and any place where people are hanging out a lot. because they're getting badly radiated. And that is bad for our health. And there's decades of studies that go back to World War II. And the IEEE beamforming document states this technology can fry your eyes like eggs. Okay? Please consider and keep in mind and do the best for your public and their health and their property values and everything. Please do that, okay? There are cities around this state that are protecting their public, and they're not going to allow this in their neighborhoods. There's several cities already that have done that. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes. You're up.
Stand back. Can you hear me from here? Oh, I can see it here. All right. I'm Allison Burchett, and I represent over 557 concerned residents on this topic, so I'll speak for them here tonight. We provided some detailed comments earlier today on very serious gaps in the current ordinance, all which are well within your control, all which have nothing to refer to as far as health guidelines. One thing I've included in here is some quotes from experts on the health effects. I think it's important to have this context, as does the audience with you, and that's, I think, why they shared tonight their feelings. So as you're making these decisions, you have the context for why this is so important. You can go to the next slide. I wanted to provide some illustration as well. So this is a currently approved site, 1701 Baker. I went there yesterday. I almost cried. It is on the corner of a church with a preschool, a Montessori school, and a high school, all within about 60 yards. I couldn't think of a worse location. Literally, they hit the jackpot as far as bad locations go. The next one, my new friend Jean, 92 years old, suffered 2 heart bypasses. He is getting a pole right there where the red arrow is. It's going to be right outside of his bedroom window. When I spoke to him yesterday, they are selling their home, which further underscores the National Association of Realty's assessment that property values will decline 20% on average when these poles are nearby. So that speaks to issues that are outside of health. That speaks to retaining our property values. So go ahead and go to the next slide. This is a comparison when looked at other cities across California and the egregious gap in safety precautions that we're having as far as setbacks. You can see where Costa Mesa sits at 25 feet in front of homes, 50 feet in front of schools, where many other cities who were similarly advised by the same lawyer that was retained by the city. Why they're getting different results, I'm not sure. Why they're able to be more protective, I'm not sure. This is well within your purview to control. And what this reads to me is that Costa Mesa isn't as concerned as other cities. And I don't believe that to be true, so prove me otherwise. And go to the next thing. There's a very detailed packet. It's in your packets tonight. It's in your emails of all of the additions that we suggest to be made. I believe that staff would agree that they are lawful and well within your control. They're all very valid and feasible. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide. This is a list of what you can control. I know we heard a list of what you can't control. Many, many things within your control that will help protect your residents. Please look at them. My recommendation for you tonight on the last page is to please incorporate these changes which have been sent to you earlier today and reiterated tonight into for City Council. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments. Yes.
Well, how about that? How about that? But of course, you're probably not even listening to them, because on this side of the room, you have all your suits lined up here, AT&T, T-Mobile, Verizon, and you're not listening to this side of the room, which most of the residents are on this side of the room. Look how many people are here. Isn't one of the first reasons for having government to protect the health and safety of the residents of a town or a city? I don't think you're caring about us. I think you're so impressed by this side of the room that you're not caring about us. When this all began, Willa was just sliding everything through, and anyway, we got some people to pull it up. This is what, 4 years ago? And there's people up there right now in the dais that had to recuse themselves. Mr. Harlan, Ms. Dierkel, I don't understand why you're not recusing yourselves tonight. I don't think you should be voting on this. Do you own stock? Do you represent someone? Don't forget, you guys, those Edison polls, there's leasing agents. They work like real estate agents. That's what Mobilite Cell Phone is and Crown Castle. They're like real estate agents. They're making money off of this. How much money is Jim Rickheimer making on this with his Verizon nonsense? I don't believe the staff of the city of Costa Mesa has any technology, has any expert in this area. I know Willa doesn't know one thing about this. I don't think she should be passing anything. I think the woman should be fired. I don't believe anybody up here tonight. I don't believe our staff is qualified to be making decisions like this. And I'm not sure any of you, perhaps you are, Mr. Perkins, because you have a biology background, but I don't think the rest of you involved in planning, and you said before, Mr. Harlan and Ms. Dierkel, you represented people, and you had to excuse yourself. So I'd like to know what you're doing up there tonight.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak to this item? Please come forward. Okay, we'll close the public comment portion of the public hearing. Commissioners, any follow-up questions for staff? Commissioner Zick, you look like you're ready to go.
Yeah, I've got a couple.
Okay.
One of the commentators mentioned something about trading between providers. That doesn't ring a bell to me as even being remotely possible. Could you speak to that? Is that even possible?
I'm not sure exactly what was being proposed, but my understanding is that the commenter was requesting that we prohibit wireless providers from allowing different companies to own them. As you can imagine, if you built a house and the city said that you couldn't sell your house to anybody, that might be a little bit difficult. And I think that would be not something that we should include in our own ordinance.
Okay, so the idea that, say, AT&T establishes a cell site, maybe for whatever reason decides they don't need it anymore, they're free to sell that site to T-Mobile, and
Correct.
We would not be involved in that process?
Correct, because our concerns relate to the aesthetics of the facility, and they look the same regardless of who they're owned by.
Okay, I had two other, thanks for the clarification. I had two other questions, probably not as serious as that one. I'm looking at handwritten page 14 and 15, and there's on the voluntary pre-submittal conference, it says the city strongly encourages but does not require the applicant to schedule and attend a pre-submittal conference with the director or staff. And then on page 15, I don't know if this contradicts or if it's speaking to something different. For submittal requirements, it says all applications, including all resubmittals, must be tendered in person to the city at a pre-scheduled appointment with the director. So is there a distinction here between a pre-submittal conference and a application submittal meeting?
There is a distinction. The submittal appointment section, subsection 2 on handwritten page 15, that's intended to require that all submittals be by appointment only and in person. This is because we have such tight shot clock requirements under the federal mandates that we want to be sure that, for example, an application isn't emailed in over the weekend or something like that where the shot clock is running and the city is not open for business, for example. So that's the intent of the submittal appointment section. Section 1 is an encouragement, really, for applicants to come in and do a pre-submittal conference before they submit. The idea there is that the city can walk them through the requirements and that they can submit a complete application the first time.
Okay. And then my last question, I think, it refers to handwritten page 36. And I'm looking at the section that describes the city's location preferences, and I was curious about a couple of things. So it's in that section where the 25 feet distance from a dwelling unit is identified. And there's another dimension of 10 feet away from a driveway. And then in item D is in David, it talks about the location must be no more than 5 feet away from a property line between adjacent parcels. And so I'm thinking about some of these pole locations relative to these dimensions. And I'm curious about the practicality of that, or if these would rule out the possibility that that particular pole could be used by a carrier. Are these suggested or are these prescriptive?
Ms. Lee. Go ahead.
So these are intended to be more prescriptive than suggested. There is an opportunity for applicants to demonstrate to the city that it is not possible to meet these requirements and still to provide wireless service, but that would be a discretionary decision. Our intent is that these are standards that are complied with.
Okay, thank you for that.
Okay, commissioners, any questions of staff? Any further questions? Commissioner Perkins and then Vice Chair Harlan.
So one question that I have is for the shot clocks. Could we get some clarification on what happens for a small cell site if we do not meet the shot clock? So if we're still evaluating a permit and that 60 days or 90 days has passed?
So federal law establishes presumptively reasonable time periods in which to act, either 60 days or 90 days. So you lose the presumption that you've acted within a reasonable period of time. So it doesn't necessarily mean that we violated the law on day 91 if it's a 90-day shot clock. We just lose the presumption that we've acted within a reasonable time frame. So it essentially then carriers have the right to sue the city to say, you need to take action on this, and then a court presumably would order the city to issue a permit or what have you. And it would become more difficult to defend the city in that instance.
So if we were to create a process that made it more likely that we extended the shot, that we would miss the shot clocks, we would be exposing ourselves to the risk of potential litigation.
Correct, and we could potentially be required to approve facilities that we wouldn't want to approve otherwise.
Thank you. Second question regards to the question about distances. So we had many other cities that had, say, 300, 500 or greater distances away from houses. How would that align with things like the federal regulation that says the city may, I'm reading staff report page 2 right now, we are stating that the city may not regulate the placement, construction, or modification of wireless service facilities in a manner that prohibits or effectively prohibits the provision of personal wireless services. So if we were to require, say, 1,000-foot setback from houses, how would that interact with that statement?
So to my knowledge, each of those cities that was listed includes a provision that has, let's say, for example, in your example, you said 1,000 feet. If a city had that requirement, then invariably that city would also have an escape hatch mechanism that they would say, if for some reason that these rules violate federal law, then X occurs instead, and there's still a method to end up approving that facility. So essentially, having that distance requirement doesn't necessarily prevent it. It just means that then you must go to the next step in the process.
Okay. Thank you.
So, Mr. Porter, if I could follow up on that real quick. So let's say the ordinance was proposing 300 feet, the current, and a carrier determined that was unreasonable. In Encinitas, for instance, they may have an escape hatch that says, if this is litigated and it is determined, or so I'm trying to, how does the city fall back to X? What's the process for falling back to X, and what is X?
So as a general rule, cities, when they have that escape mechanism, the escape hatch, let's call it, that will say essentially, if for some reason a violation of 1,500 square feet, if that would effectively prohibit federal the city from, if that would effectively prohibit the deployment of services, then, and they can establish this need, then what typically ends up happening is that staff ends up approving the facility because they said, well, federal law requires it, so therefore we'll approve it. The net result is staff ends up having far more latitude than you would if you had precise rules. So under what's being proposed right now, staff has far less discretion. We must approve it, we must deny it, as opposed to a situation where you have 1,500 feet where it's much broader and then staff would have to say, well, and then it's hard to say as, it's just a general rule, every ordinance is different. But in that situation, quite often cities end up losing incentives to essentially encourage certain types of applications, and you end up losing the ability to discourage other types of applications. It becomes much more of an open-ended process as opposed to something that you can control. It's a judgment call. What's the better approach?
Okay, thank you. Please, thank you. Vice Chair Harlan.
Just to follow up on that, so do those other cities have ordinances like what's being proposed here, which provides for an exemption?
Yes.
Okay, so there's an alternate path for an applicant to pursue if it can't meet the prescribed standards.
You're talking about the other cities?
Yes.
Typically, yes.
Right, but similar to what's being proposed here.
So one of the main differences between those situations and this situation is here, there's a ministerial procedure, meaning that the city must approve things. Under federal law, a city is required to have a ministerial process to approve small cell facilities. The city council directed staff to return with an ordinance to come up with a ministerial process to approve small cell facilities.
Okay, is that it? So I want to fall back on this a little bit. So again, saying that we were 300 feet, let's just say that was going to be our standard. A couple of things happen. The applicant comes in, puts a gun to our head and says, either take me through the escape route and give me a smaller distance or I'm going to sue you, or they don't even come in and apply at all. Is that kind of what the outcomes are?
I think those are common outcomes, yes.
Okay, so potentially litigation unless we ministerially employ the escape route, or we just have an industry that shuns Costa Mesa altogether.
We do need to have some sort of...
Folks, now we're not, sorry. We listened to you and we didn't clap and didn't make comments when you talked, so please let us get the business done here. Thanks.
I would encourage the city council to adopt a ministerial ordinance. That doesn't mean you have to, it could be very narrow as to what you approve ministerially, or it could be broad. But my encouragement is that you have some sort of ministerial process.
Okay. So now staff is aware and the commissioners are aware we received correspondence late today from a cell provider with respect to a handful of the provisions within the ordinance. I have not had a chance to see that communication. I know because it came in very late, but can somebody summarize for us what they're, okay, this is the last time, or I'm going to we're going to shut down for 10 minutes. Just let us get through this, okay? Summarize the letter and what the requests are, and if you can. I'm sorry to put you on the spot here, but I haven't seen it, so.
This was a comment that was received at approximately 3:50 p.m. today. It was sent individually to planning commissioners. The letter generally outlines specific comments on the proposed ordinance and suggests that certain provisions of our ordinance violate FCC standards. These are generally in the areas of permits being required and the applicant's requirement to obtain permits and other regulatory approvals. Generally also the requirement to provide construction drawings, comments on RF emission standards, public notice requirements, the provision related to the pole license agreement, comments regarding the provision related to submittal appointments, as well as comments on incomplete applications and being deemed automatically withdrawn. There's also comments related to the provision on concurrent processing that would allow for concurrent processing. There's comments on the eligible facilities requests section, and also the indemnification and abandoned wireless facilities section. And lastly, cost reimbursement, undergrounding, and electric meters, general comments on those sections as well.
Okay, and I'm sorry, legal counsel, have you had a chance to review that letter or see it? Is there any specific request from the correspondence, either relative to specific language, modifying provisions in those areas, continuance, what?
Is AT&T here? I don't see AT&T here. I was going to ask them to comment. This is the first that I've had. I'm reviewing it as we speak. I don't see anything in it that is specifically requesting a continuance, but they did have a number of comments.
Okay. Commissioners, what's your pleasure on this? Unless there's more questions, relative to the communication from AT&T, does anybody have comments or concerns about that? And whether or not we want to be able to have the time to do our work on those in addition to any other materials that were provided by the public tonight, so that we give the city council a completed package.
Mr. Chairman?
Commissioner Zick, and then Commissioner Russell, and then Commissioner Colbert.
Yeah, so I noticed this email in my inbox late this afternoon and only had the chance to skim it to see the general tone of what they were asking for. And their comment was essentially what staff has indicated. I think in light of the changes that they say need to be made, and I'm not validating that they do, but it was a rather detailed letter. And quite frankly, in light of the suggestions, again, from the public on change, and I haven't studied these, I'm not the expert on this, changes that they're encouraging that do not appear to be direct health related, the third rail that we really are not trying to deal with. It seems like more work needs to be done. And what I'm not interested in doing is taking a bunch of ingredients and passing it off to city council and say, we're done, you mix it up and bake it. I think we have more work to do, and I would be in favor of continuing this item to give staff an opportunity to keep working on it. I'd like to have a product that addresses more of the areas of interest that we seem to be able to address.
Okay, Commissioner Russell?
Yes, I just feel like between the letter from AT&T and some of the additional comments that we've gotten today, this evening, I'm not comfortable making a decision on it at this point. So that's just my input on it.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Colbert?
Similarly, I met with Allison and a couple of, I guess, maybe last week, and I don't feel like I've had sufficient time to actually properly and thoroughly review and give it the appropriate attention as they have given to this matter. Moreover, the letters that we have received from countless community members, in addition to the letter that we received from AT&T, I think further reinforce the fact that I just want to properly give something to council that I can be confident in, and right now I just can't say that I am.
Vice Chair Harlan, anything? No, I'll speak if you want.
No.
All right.
I tend to share the same sentiment with my colleagues, although with one caveat, which is I don't think continuing it is necessarily a win for anyone, all told. I think the public to understand that we have been given some direction by the city council about a framework for this ordinance and how it should work and how it should operate relative to the workload of staff and the resources we have available. That is a constraint for us here. So it's clear to me that the council would like a ministerial process. And I think that is reasonable and appropriate. What that discretionary process looks like, I think, is still up for debate, and I'd like to explore that a little bit more. But I want at least the public to understand that in addition to having to deal with federal law here at the Planning Commission level, we're still advising the council on an administrative process. It is not as simple as just let's ban cell sites. I don't want anybody to think that that is the case here. And secondly, I don't want anybody to get the impression that we are just putting this on the back burner or we don't care about it. All of us up here have family members, children, wives. This is important to all of us. So that is my comment for this evening.
Okay, and so Commissioner Zick, if you'd like to make a motion, and if there's a second, I'll speak to the motion as well.
I would, Mr. Chairman.
And by the way, if there's interest in a continuance, our next regularly scheduled meeting is January 13th. And given the holiday, staff, if that's going to be the motion, well, I'll let you make the motion and then I'll ask staff. How about that? Because I want to make sure that if our next regularly scheduled meeting is January 13th, if we have enough time to deal with particularly the myriad of issues that have come up in this correspondence today, and other what I would consider kind of ministerial or process issues brought up by the public.
So I'll make a motion that we continue the item until January 13th. And there are two specific things I'm interested in understanding the next time, assuming this passes, the next time this comes before us. One is a response to the AT&T suggestions, and from both a process standpoint and a legal standpoint, whether we want to make changes as a result of that. The second thing I would be very interested in, and I'll start first by way of question, and that is, do you have a copy of the presentation that was shown by the member of the public this evening?
I don't, but we've met in the past. I'll request it.
So, okay, we have it actually. Okay.
Thank you.
What I'd like to have a better understanding of, and it's just a request, and it's a request of staff, is to the extent that there are things on that last page that they are suggesting that we include or consider, to the extent that we can't, won't, don't think that it's appropriate, I'd like to understand why not. That way, I'll feel much more comfortable taking this framework, recommending it to City Council, knowing that we really have, to my mind, done our due diligence in terms of trying to satisfy the public. So that's my motion, just continue to January 13th.
Is there a second? Okay, so there's a motion by Commissioner Zick and a second by Commissioner Russell to continue until January 13th. My comments generally are, I agree with the motion. I think we have a little bit more lifting to do. I'm interested in kind of the bullet points that Mr. Porter or Ms. Lee read off relative to AT&T's letter. Strike me as being expressing some concern about setting up a system that becomes unreasonable or cost burdensome, or essentially is sort of like stalling until the clock runs out. I think in Ms. Burchett's presentation, there may be some process elements that could work. I don't know yet. But at the end of the day, I want to finish this work at this January 13th meeting and get it to council because their direction to us is pretty clear. That is to develop a streamlined ministerial process for moving these applications forward. It isn't about banning cell sites. It isn't about banning 5G. It's nothing like that. We're not playing in that arena. We're looking at an ordinance that the city council has put a framework around, and I think we have a little bit more work on it before we give it to them. But, so those are my comments, and then I will call for the question on the motion.
That motion carried 6-0 with Commissioner Torje absent.
Okay. Staff, is January 13th okay? Or are we going to have enough time? I'm assuming so, but nobody spoke up.
Since it was continued to a date certain, it's fine from a noticing perspective. Obviously, with the holiday closure, we'll have to hustle, but we'll do that.
Okay, thank you. I would have pushed it out another date, but then I have a sneaking suspicion that a city council member or two would be calling me about why we aren't moving this forward, so. Okay, thank you very much. Does anybody need a break? Okay, we'll take a 5-minute break. Thank you. All right, folks, we're going to get started in about 30 seconds.
Really?
If we could take your seats, please. Okay, we have 3 other applications before us, so we want to get moving. And Merry Christmas to you too, sir. Okay, we're back. Julie, public hearing number 2, please.
Public hearing item number 2, Development Agreement 19-02, an amendment to Pacific Arts Plaza Development Agreement DA-00-04. This is a call to report any ex parte communications.
Commissioners, any communications to report? Okay, I had a quick conversation on the telephone today with Mr. Dan Miller from the Irvine Company, and nothing specific was discussed in detail about the application. Okay, Ms. Ashabi.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the Planning Commission. This item before you this evening is a request for an extension of 2 years to a development agreement, what we refer to as Pacific Arts Plaza. This development agreement applies to a 6.26-acre site, which is a sub-area of South Coast Plaza Town Center. It's bounded by Anton Boulevard, the 405 freeway, Bristol Street, Avenue of the Arts, and the project also includes the Noguchi Garden. In December of 2010, the property was acquired by the Irvine Company from McGuire. This map shows the general area as referred to as Pacific Arts Plaza. And this slide just talks about the previous actions taken by the City Council. The agreement was executed in 2001, and it was approved in conjunction with the preliminary master plan for South Coast Plaza Town Center. That was covered by also an environmental impact report. In 2002, the council approved the 2 town center master plan, which allowed construction of an 18-story high-rise development and a parking structure, in addition to the demolition of a parking structure that was on site. In 2007, the council approved general plan amendment and North Costa Mesa specific plan amendment that allowed transfer of building area within Pacific Arts Plaza sub-area, and the proposed new development within the sub-area included 1 high-rise tower with 180 residential units and the demolition of the 5-story bank building at the corner. So the request before you this evening is for a short-term extension of 2 years to the current development agreement. This process is a recommendation from the Planning Commission to the City Council. The amendment to the development agreement is executed by an adoption of an ordinance. while completing the research and the planning process, the public benefits of the development agreement will remain in place. For example, the 50% parking discount for the residents that's currently received will continue. There's also some obligations with respect to the theaters and art district that will continue to be in effect. And the applicant is also proposing to pay $25,000 towards any cause that the City Council seems to feel it's appropriate. And the proposed amendment does not extend the life of the development fees, and those would have to be calculated at the time of the development. Before you this evening is a recommendation to find this amendment consistent with the EIR that was originally adopted for the project, and also deeming this to be not a specific project under environmental, under CEQA, and also giving the first reading to the ordinance that would make a recommendation to the City Council for the extension of the agreement.
Okay, thank you, Manu.
The applicant is also here this evening if you have any questions.
Thank you very much. Commissioners, any questions of staff on this particular item? Okay. Seeing none, I will open the public hearing and ask the applicant to come forward. Good evening, sir. Have you reviewed the amendment? Do you agree with it? And have you seen the slight adjustment that was made in the supplemental memo that was given to us today? And do you agree with that change?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I'm Jeff Davis on behalf of the Irvine Company this evening. We have seen the staff report and the supplemental memorandum and are okay with all of the revisions that are in there. And frankly, with the addition of your presentation this evening, we thought the staff report was very detailed and comprehensive, and I and my team are here to answer any questions the commission might have.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Davis. Commissioners, any question of the applicant? Okay, thank you, sir. We'll open this for public comment. Any member of the public wishing to speak to this item, please come forward. Seeing none, I'll close the public comment. I'm assuming Mr. Davis doesn't want to jump back up again. So we'll close the public hearing. And commissioners, are there any comments or a motion? Okay, we have Commissioner Perkins.
So I actually have a couple of questions. So with the provision after that, so for these 180 residential units that are currently proposed as a part of this development agreement project, is there any provision that some of those would be affordable housing, especially within the context of our current RENA numbers?
Mr. Davis.
Actually, the residential component is not part of this development agreement. That was a separate action that was subsequent to the development agreement, is outside of that. The only action this evening is relative to the office space that's still left to develop.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay.
That's good.
Anyone else? Thank you, Commissioner Perkins. Okay, so there's a motion was made by, I thought I saw Commissioner Colbert, seconded by Commissioner Harlan, and Commissioner Colbert, if you could read that motion into the record, please.
Yeah, so moved to. Staff recommends that the Planning Commission adopt a resolution to recommend that the following actions to the City Council. Find pursuant that the provisions of CEQA Act, California Public Resource Code, sections 21,000, and secondly, give a reading to Ordinance 19XX, approving an amendment to Development Agreement 00-04, extending the term of the agreement for 24 months to August 15th of 2023.
Okay, motion by Commissioner Colbert and seconded by Vice Chair Harlan. Any comments on the motion? Commissioner Zick.
Just want to make sure the motion includes the minor revisions to the agreement that staff prepared.
Yes, Commissioner Colbert?
Yes.
You're fine with that? And the second, I'm assuming, is? Okay. Great, we'll call for the question.
That motion carried 6-0 with Commissioner Torje absent.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, Julie, public hearing item number 3, please.
Planning application item number, public hearing item number 3. Planning application 19-14 for a variance to allow a temporary multi-phase remediation system in the side setback at 3599 Harbor Boulevard. This is a call to report any ex parte communications.
Commissioners, any communications to report? Commissioner Perkins.
I had a conversation with an employee of the facility, Carlos, while I was on an on-site visit.
Okay, thank you very much. Anyone else? Okay, Ms. Shabi.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This item before you this evening is the discretionary approval requesting a variance from a landscape setback along Harbor Boulevard. The proposed project is addition of a screened temporary MPE system designed to extract soil vapor and groundwater on the subject site. This is the project site. It's located at the corner of MacArthur Boulevard and Harbor Boulevard. It is 0.33 acres and bound to the south by this Anna Mesa Inn Motel and City of Santa Ana to the north. The property zoning is MP, which is industrial park, and the adjacent property is zoned commercial limited, where the motel is developed. This slide shows the existing condition. The property is currently developed as a oil change facility. The site was previously occupied by Unocal Fueling and Service Station from 1964 to 1991. In 1991, all underground storage tanks and the gas station structures were removed. And during this removal, more than 4,000 tons of impacted soil was excavated to accommodate the construction of the oil change facility. The site contamination is currently monitored by the Orange County Healthcare Agency. The request is the addition of a screened temporary MPE system, and the equipment is intended to reduce the potential risk to human and environmental health by decreasing the concentration of the contaminants on site. The applicant is proposing to locate the facility within the required landscape setback along Harbor Boulevard. This project was previously approved in 2011, and the system was not installed. In 2011, the Planning Commission approved it at the current location. However, there was some dispute with the adjacent property owner, and this project did not move forward. There were actually a couple of trees that were removed within the landscaped areas that remained they are still open. In 2018, the Orange County Healthcare Agency issued a letter requesting that the remediation at the site start, and the project is implementing a contamination that had occurred at the site with the previous operator. Because of the site constraint and there are limited number of parking spaces and the circulation on the site, there are only one area in the site that this equipment can be located, and that would be along the Harbor Boulevard, if you can see where this arrow is located. This is a site plan that's proposed. It shows the location of the proposed facility. There would be a block wall screening it on all 3 sites. This will maintain the circulation on site and allows the applicant to continue operation. This is a larger plan that shows location of the wall and what's being proposed as in terms of landscaping to screen it. Again, this elevation shows the wall in relation to the existing building and also the screening methods. This project falls under 3 different categories under the California Environmental Quality Act Class 1, Class 3, and Class 11 exemptions. The project is consistent with the general plan policy that encourages best practices in hazardous waste management and ensure consistency with the city, county, and federal guidelines and standards. There are several conditions of approval to ensure that once this operation is completed, that the equipment is removed and the landscaping is replaced. Condition number 3 includes that all the screen walls be compatible to the building. Condition number 5, it requires vines to camouflage the walls. And also condition number 7 includes that within 30 days of completion of the remediation, that the landscaping be replaced. So the staff is recommending that the Planning Commission move forward with the project under categorical exemption and approve the project with the conditions as included in the packet.
Thank you, Mrs. Shabi. Commissioners, any questions? I see Commissioner Zick and then Commissioner Colbert and then Commissioner Perkins.
So I'm going to have a couple of questions. I'd want to be able to refer to the applicant. Do we know if the applicant is here?
Yes.
Oh, okay, I'll hold off on those questions. I was not able to find anywhere where it was estimated how long anyone expected the vapor extraction process to take place. Is this 5 years, 10 years, indeterminate?
I think the initial estimate that we got, it was about 3 years.
3 years, okay. And you mentioned this project had been approved and then permits expired in 2013. Is the nature of this area that is planned for the equipment, is it the same as what was previously planned, or is this different?
It was approved under a variance, very similar to this, what's being proposed.
And so the difficulties that prevented, or I guess the dispute with the property owner that occurred previously that apparently prevented the project from moving forward, has that been resolved?
I am not aware, but we did not receive any comments. We have not received any comments in regards to the public notice that was published or sent out.
Okay, one last question, if you could just educate me on this. Finding that the project is exempt from CEQA, if any project screamed environmental, this one does. Tell me how this is exempt from CEQA.
The project in this case is the installation of equipment for the purpose of remediating an existing hazard. The CEQA guidelines section cited in the staff report and in the resolution are the section 15301, class 1 existing facilities. This applies typically to minor alterations to an already developed site that doesn't expand the existing use. There's also section 15303, class 3, new construction. This exemption can exempt projects that construct up to 10,000 square feet of commercial building. Obviously, this is a much smaller magnitude of construction. And section 15311 is accessory structures, and that is intended to exempt projects that involve accessory uses or accessory installations to the main use. And this equipment falls under that description as well.
Okay, thank you for that.
Okay, Commissioner Colbert.
I think a piece of that, my question was asked, but when the applicant is available, I guess I do have a question related to how we got here. I think that is a question that I want to understand a bit more that does not seem to be clear to ensure that this doesn't happen again, since a variance was passed in the past and the equipment was not installed. Can you kind of explain that process again, maybe?
So the regulatory agency regarding this cleanup is the Orange County Healthcare Agency, and they're responsible for monitoring this activity and doing the measurements on monthly or sometimes on weekly basis. The city does not get involved, but the city approves the variance for locating the equipment. So if that did not occur, the city has no way of enforcing that.
And to ensure that it doesn't happen again, we
would need to be in communication with the county agency.
okay. And is a representative from the county agency here or just the applicant?
The applicant is here. The county agency has directed the applicant to move forward, and we do have the contact from the Orange County Healthcare Agency.
Okay, thank you. As it relates to, I know this is an industrial zoning, but I just wanted to ask this. I don't know what this type of system looks like as far as the MPA system, but it looks pretty robust and it's going to be extracting things. Is there a sound consideration that could potentially impact, adjacencies?
Yes, there could be. I believe the sound could be up to 70 decibels, but within the parameters of the equipment, and the block wall sound acts as a sound barrier. So once it travels about 20 feet from the equipment, it would be probably equivalent to what's allowed in the commercial zone.
And I believe it was conditioned, but just to ensure, so during the process after this estimated approximately 3-year period, then the city will send someone to check if the landscaping has been removed and replaced as conditioned?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Perkins.
Thank you. So I have a couple questions for the applicant as well, but one of the things that I was wondering about, and this may be applicant as well as staff, this is coming exceptionally close to the bus stop that is on the site. Have there been considerations for trying to make the impact on that bus stop, and I'm looking at hand number page 19, it is coming, literally 18 inches behind the bench at the bus stop. Has there been consideration on attempting to mitigate the impacts on people waiting at the bus or for the bus?
Yes, staff had a concern about how close it was to the bus stop, and we brought that up to the attention of the applicant. And because of the constraints of the size of it, this is like the best that can be done. 18 inches is probably the maximum clearance that they can provide between the equipment and the sidewalk.
Okay. And from a noise perspective, we were just asking about noise. It seems like you're going to have multiple people sitting a couple of feet on the other side of a block wall. So has that been looked at or studied, the impact of the noise on those people waiting at that location?
At the bus stop locations?
Correct. Yes, thank you.
So the bus stop would be, with the equipment at the location it's pretty high, 70 decibels, but then with the sound barriers, it will go down probably about 10 decibels. It's also adjacent to a busy roadway. And those types of the bus stops are considered transient, so there's no provision in the code that has a specific standard as far as noise is concerned.
Thank you.
Okay, anyone else? Okay, we'll open the public hearing and ask the applicant to come forward. If you have a presentation, sir. And I think some of the commissioners have questions for you. And if you could state your name and address for the record. Good evening. Sir, have you read the staff report and the conditions of approval, and do you agree with them?
I have. I'm Zach Mason. I work for Arcadis.
Do you agree with the conditions?
I do.
Okay. Floor is yours.
I don't have a presentation.
Okay.
This is it. So you have some questions for me.
So Commissioner Zick had questions for you.
So Zach, this project clearly has a long history behind it. Can you tell me when you became responsible for any aspect of this?
This project came back to Arcadis about a year ago. So we were involved in it probably 8 years ago, and then the consultant changed. Some of the holdups you referenced earlier were in relation to access agreements with the property owner. Those have all been obtained. That was part of the delays of the 3-year period for the first variance approval for this project, from what I gathered looking through the history of it.
So the company you're with is Arcadis?
Correct.
Okay. I was looking at the Orange County Healthcare Agency letter. Staff report references it as attachment 6, but I think it's actually attachment 5. The letter was addressed to a Carl Bewley. So are you familiar with this letter, Zach?
Correct. Carl Bewley would have been one of the project managers for our client at the time, 2018. The client project manager has since changed. It's now Shelby Lathrop.
So you're familiar with the contents of the letter?
Correct.
And assuming this variance is approved, when do you expect construction to physically start?
Once the variance is approved, we'd still have to get approval for discharge from the city. And once that's nailed down, then we can get a construction bid, get a construction schedule together. But roughly 3 to 4 months.
Could staff help me understand this permit for discharge process? Just want to make sure that doesn't become a holdup.
So the equipment needs to be connected to some pipelines, and actually the discharge would have to be permitted by the sanitation district.
Sanitation district. You're aware of that, Zach? It's not the city?
Yes, Michelle directed us to the sanitation district, but there's going to be 2 streams of discharge, water and treated vapor. So that's pretty standard for this type of system. So we're familiar with permitting that.
Okay. Well, I'm looking forward to seeing some actual work done here. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. Commissioner Perkins, you have questions of the applicant?
Yeah, I guess
And I
would.
think Commissioner Colbert did as well.
So again, my question was sort of noise for folks in and also at the bus stop. So could you maybe help me understand the 70 decibel noise? How loud are we talking about? And again, what considerations have been done to help mitigate that impact?
Sure. So originally the system was tried to be located closer to the Anna Mesa Inn, but due to the 2 walls and the proximity to the windows, it would have been too loud for the residents most likely. So that was one of the considerations for placing it in the planter. Additionally, the 2 kind of loudest pieces of equipment, the rotary claw blowers, have been placed in sound enclosures. And then on top of that, they're located in the 6-foot tall concrete enclosure. So the equipment manufacturer quotes the decibel rate at 70 to 75 decibels at 5 feet. And then on top of that, there's going to be a cinder block wall, which will also dampen the noise. And this is pretty typical. We operate these at former service stations all around Southern California that are now either Starbucks, McDonald's, what have you, next to bus stops all the time. And we typically don't have any problem with decibel readings.
That's it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. Commissioner Colbert, did you have a question?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and ask. So you just answered Commissioner Zick's question regarding the timeline. So we're looking at approximately March before machine is in operation?
Well, we can't order the equipment until we have a variance approval, right? So we could start construction in March, but we have to procure a fabrication company to build this equipment. So until I get a formal quote from them on the fabrication, the dates and whatnot, I can't tell you it'll be 3 months. I could go to them and they could say this piece of equipment will take 5 months to build, for example.
Okay, so that potential period could extend beyond what you just stated. Okay, as far as additional impacts on the site, obviously this process is taking a significant amount of time. Are there any additional environmental impacts that could have occurred or may be occurring that you may not be aware of at this time?
That's highly unlikely. The UST is removed, so there's no source anymore. If anything, they've gotten better through natural attenuation.
Okay, those are my questions.
Okay, Vice Chair Harlan.
I just have one question and kind kind of in honor of former Commissioner Carla Navarro Woods, I have to ask about the landscaping, and in particular the Boston ivy. Are you married to having that, or is there another California native drought-tolerant vine you would elect to put there?
No, honestly, we're not married to that. That was suggested by your staff.
Okay, well.
Carla is proud. Okay. Very good. Okay, thank you, sir. I have no questions for you. Are there, I'll close the public hearing. Oh, wait, no, we have to have anybody speak to this item? I'm sorry. Anybody from the public wish to speak to this particular item? Okay, seeing none, we'll close the public comment and close the public hearing. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, commissioners, questions of staff? Any further questions or a motion?
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Zick.
I would like to adopt the staff recommendation, find the project is categorically exempt from the provisions of the California Environmental Quality Act, CEQA, under CEQA guidelines, section 15301, 15303, 15311, and approve planning application 19-14, subject to conditions of approval.
Okay, and if you could enter your motion, is there a second? Okay, and that's seconded by Commissioner Perkins. Any final comments?
Yeah.
Okay, Commissioner Zick, then Commissioner Colbert.
Get her done.
Okay, that was short and sweet. Commissioner Colbert.
Similarly, I just have a question for staff, maybe in the future, to better understand the process of a variance. Specifically, I've never seen a temporary variance, so this is kind of a new process for me. And understanding like the legal process, does a variance then hold a precedent for future cases? And I just want to understand that, given that this will ultimately be removed, I guess, in 36 months?
So the variance in this case, because it is temporary in nature, and also the site really, the way it's designed, there are really no other options to locate the facility. So unless there's another site that has very similar situations, it wouldn't set a precedent.
Okay, anybody else? Okay. I just have one comment, no variance, no remediation. So call for the question. It's like.
That motion carried 6-0 with Commissioner Torje absent.
Can we have the old switches back, by the way? Okay.
For the paddles.
Thank you very much. And that decision is final unless appealed to the City Council in 7 days. Okay. And then we have public hearing item number 4.
Public hearing item number 4, planning application 19-21 and zoning application 19-90 for a conditional use permit for issuance of state alcohol beverage control ABC license type 20 off-sale beer and wine to allow the sale of alcohol beverages for off-site consumption. Minor conditional use permit for a wine bar with less than 300 square feet of public area in a multi-tenant center, and a deviation from parking requirements based on unusual operating characteristics, a finding of public convenience or necessity for issuance of a state ABC license type 42 on-sale beer and wine, and an amendment to zoning application 09-42 to modify the hours of operation on an adjacent bar at 816 West 19th Street. This is a call to report any ex parte communications.
Commissioners, any communications to report? Commissioner Perkins.
I met with Kyle and to discuss the proposal, and also had a short discussion with Councilmember Arliss Reynolds.
Okay, very good. Anyone else? Okay, Ms. Walsh.
Thank you. Good evening, Chair and Commissioners. As mentioned, this is an application for a conditional use permit for Semi-Tropic Wines at 816 West 19th Street. The project site is located in the city's west side on the north side of West 19th Street between Federal Avenue and Placentia Avenue. The property is zoned C1 Local Business District and has a general plan land use designation of general commercial. Properties abutting the site to the east, west, and south are zoned Local Business District and are developed with commercial uses. Properties abutting the site to the north are zoned general industrial and are developed with wholesale and manufacturing uses. The property is not located within 200 feet of residentially zoned property. Physical on-site improvements of the subject property include a 2,500 square foot multi-tenant commercial building with 7 legal non-conforming parking spaces. The building was constructed in the 1960s and contains 3 tenant spaces. The building is occupied by one tenant, Costa, who operates a bar within an 830 square foot tenant space. The other tenant space includes a 552 square foot personal storage unit, and Semi-Tropic Wines proposes to occupy the vacant 1,118 square foot tenant space formerly occupied by an upholstery shop. As it relates to prior land use approvals at the subject property, in 2003, City Council unanimously approved on appeal zoning application 3-11 to allow sale of alcoholic beverages for on-site consumption after 11 p.m. and to deviate from shared parking requirements for the reestablishment of a bar which had been operating at the subject property since 1994. In 2010, Planning Commission approved zoning application 9-42, which amended zoning application 3-11 to allow for an ABC license upgrade, extended hours of operation, live entertainment and dancing, and legalize an outdoor patio. The subject application is a request for a conditional use permit to allow the sale of alcoholic beverages for off-site consumption at a wine shop, a minor conditional use permit to deviate from parking requirements based on unique operating characteristics of a wine bar, a public convenience or necessity finding for issuance of a new ABC Type 42 on-sale beer and wine license, and an amendment to zoning application 9-42 to modify the hours of operation of an existing bar, Casa, to be open from 8 p.m. to 2 a.m. on Sundays. The applicant is applying for 2 state alcohol and beverage control licenses, a Type 20 off-sale beer and wine license for the retail wine shop, and a Type 42 off-sale beer and wine license for the wine bar consisting of less than 300 square feet of public area. The wine shop and bar primarily focuses on the sale and consumption of organic wines, and no kitchen facilities would be provided. Therefore, no food other than small snack items would be served on site. Proposed hours of operation of the wine shop and bar are from 11 a.m. to 8 p.m. daily. Here's a proposed floor plan of the facility. The teal area on this slide represents the approximately 181 square foot retail area where wine bottles would be sold for off-site consumption under a Type 20 ABC license. The purple area in this slide depicts the wine bar and public seating area. The seating area consists of less than 300 square feet and includes 7 tables and 4 bar stools. The remaining area shown in orange includes the ancillary storage rooms and restrooms. The proposed use is categorized as a liquor store because it is a retail store with less than 10,000 square feet in an area that sells limited alcoholic beverages. Per zoning code section 13-200.71, a conditional use permit is required for establishments that provide alcoholic beverages for off-sale consumption. As mentioned, a Type 20 off-sale beer and wine ABC license is also required for this request. Although the use is categorized as a liquor store, the business would not operate like a traditional liquor store where a variety of items, including food, non-food, beer, and wine, are sold. Additionally, the retail area would consist of only 181 square feet and would sell exclusively wine. As noted earlier, the applicant is requesting a Type 20 license and a Type 42 license. According to ABC, the property is located within a census tract that has undue concentration of on-sale ABC licenses. Specifically, the ratio of the number of on-sale licenses to population within the census tract exceed the countywide ratio. 4 on-sale licenses are allowed, while 5 on-sale licenses exist. Therefore, a public convenience and necessity finding is required for the Type 42 on-sale beer and wine license. It should be noted that no public convenience and necessity finding is required for the Type 20 ABC license for off-sale, since 2 are allowed and 1 exists. In accordance to City Council Policy 500-8, the Planning Commission may make a public convenience and necessity finding for the requested license. Staff supports such a finding because the wine bar is proposing to close before 8 p.m. before the neighboring bar opens, and because the 5 licenses that make up the overconcentration allowed for distilled spirits, whereas the proposed use offers a specialized service by focusing on wine tasting, particularly organic wines. In addition, the police department has reviewed the request and has no objections to the proposed use. Overall, the project site is legal nonconforming concerning parking standards. The applicant proposes to remove the nonconforming parking spaces in the front setback and provide drought-tolerant landscaping, bringing the site into closer conformance with parking and landscape standards. The applicant also proposes to restripe and reslurry the rear parking lot to provide a van-accessible handicap space, 5 striped parking spaces, and a bike rack for a total of 7 parking spaces. The city, it should be noted that the city does allow application of a 1 parking space credit when bike racks are provided. Here's the rendering of the front elevation with the proposed landscape and parking improvements at the site. As it relates to parking, 7 parking spaces are proposed at the subject property, while the proposed use requires 15 parking spaces based on the existing tenant mix. Therefore, if the use were to be approved, a minor conditional use permit would also be required to allow a deviation from parking requirements based on unique operating characteristics. Specifically, the applicant is proposing offset hours of operation from the adjacent bar, whose proposed hours are from 8 p.m. to 2 a.m. daily. Since the proposed wine shop and bar requires only 5 parking spaces based on the retail parking ratio, and 7 are proposed, there would be sufficient parking on site to accommodate the use during the times the wine shop proposes to operate. Also included in this proposal is a request to amend zoning application 9-42 to modify the hours of operation of Costa. The adjacent bar was approved to operate from 8 p.m. to 2 a.m. Monday through Saturday and 11 a.m. to 2 a.m. on Sundays, although the bar was approved to operate as early as 11 a.m. on Sundays, the business does not open until 8 p.m. daily. Therefore, CASA is requesting to amend zoning application 9-42 to reduce their hours of operation to be open from 8 p.m. to 2 a.m. on Sundays. Consequently, there would be no parking conflicts during the time Semi-Tropic Wines proposes to operate, since the adjacent bar would be closed and the other tenant space has no business activity. It should be noted that other than the modified hours of operation, all other conditions of approval from ZA 9-42 remain in effect. Furthermore, staff has included conditions of approval related to the hours of operation of both businesses, parking and site improvements, and alcohol sales and service. Code requirement number 8 requires a second restroom to be provided per California Building Code section 422.2. This requirement was included as a courtesy to the applicant and applies when the occupant load is over 50. The applicant's initial project plan showed an occupancy of 51. However, that applicant's project plans have since been revised to reflect an occupancy of 43. Therefore, staff recommends removal of the code requirement related to the second restroom. And furthermore, condition of approval number 7 ensures that the applicant's construction plans comply with the applicable building code requirements during plan check. And with that, staff recommends that the Planning Commission adopt a resolution to find that the project is categorically exempt from the provisions of the California Environmental Quality Act, per CEQA Guidelines Section 15301, existing facilities, and approve Planning Application 19-21, Zoning Application 19-90, and Zoning Application 19-95, subject to conditions of approval. That concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions. The applicant's also available and has prepared a short presentation this evening.
Thank you, Ms. Walsh, very much for your presentation. Commissioner Colbert is first up, and then Commissioner Zick, and then Commissioner Perkins.
Thank you for this presentation. Just a couple of questions. Just want to clarify on handwritten page 11, the proposed hours, which reflect the option or states that they will be closed on Sunday, but the staff report may read different. Can you provide clarification on that?
Yes, no problem. So the handwritten page 11 is an older applicant letter. The applicant has since provided an updated applicant letter that I have available. Additionally, CASA has provided a letter with their proposed hours of operation on Sundays.
Okay. In condition, I guess I'll start from the top. condition number 7 states that no wine should be sold with an alcoholic content greater than 15% by volume expect for dinner wines which have been aged for 2 years or more. How are we going to control that mechanism? Like how are we going to control that?
That is actually a condition of approval suggested by the Department of Alcoholic and Beverage Control.
Okay.
So that is to satisfy their requirements.
Okay, so there's no like enforceable, we're not gonna go and test the wine, or like how do we enforce that?
I'll volunteer.
Okay, and then the next one is related to condition number 13. If parking shortages or other parking related problems arise, obviously there are parking challenges on multiple sites in Costa Mesa, and likewise there will be parking challenges here. Were there any discussions with the applicant related to alternative parking strategies or the implementation potentially of a valet plan in the future?
There were discussions regarding the potential for off-site parking at 2 specific properties. However, the applicant did not move forward with those proposals because they were unable to obtain written consent from the property owners.
Okay. There was also I guess in relation to that condition, were there discussions, I know there was mention of a ride share option, or that there potentially may be ride sharing due to discourage drivers because of the alcoholic use. Is there an identified space for that ride share to prevent queuing in the street, or since there will be multiple drop-offs potentially?
There's not an identified space, but there is a space in the roadway in front of this particular set of businesses, and also the ideal location is on private property or adjacent to a curb that's a legal parking space. But it was not specifically identified on the plan.
Okay. And then on handwritten page number 18, it discusses a city alley. I just want to understand, does this alley belong to the city? And if so, would this require an abandonment before that they can install whatever design features are being proposed?
So I believe what you're referring to is the comment letter provided by Costa on handwritten page 18.
Correct.
So that refers to the legal nonconforming driveway on the east side of the property. Okay. That is actually the main access to the subject property. So when you're approaching the site, there appears to be 2 driveways, one on the west, one on the east. Mm-hmm. The one on the east is the actual, their access to that site. So with this, at the time that this letter was submitted, there were, let's see here, vision. Yeah, so since the time the letter was submitted, there have been revisions to the proposed site plan, which removed the proposed walkway, converting their non-conforming drive aisle into a walkway because they could not secure a parking agreement with Mexicali Tires, which is the property to the west.
So I should ignore that?
Yes,
okay.
Correct.
And I think that exhausts my questions with the exception of a comment that I want to make related to biking and drinking. I know that there's a proposal for the bike racks, but I don't know if I want to ride in those bike lanes we talked about with somebody leaving one of these places, but that's my question. Those are my questions.
Okay, Commissioner Zick and then Commissioner Perkins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm looking at the drawing on handwritten page 63, and I'm struggling to find the 7th parking stall. I see 5 that are identified with circled numbers. I see a handicap, which would be 6. I don't see where number 7 is.
So the city does apply 1 credit for a parking space when you provide the bike racks.
You said that. Thank you.
No problem.
So You explained how the 7 parking stalls was sufficient for semi-tropic wines. And I'm looking at your staff report, page 6. I'm not sure I understand how 7 parking stalls, and I'll come back to that, but I'm not sure how I understand 7 parking stalls being adequate for CASA. Could you help explain that? Seems to indicate 8 are required, actually 8.3, which would be 9.
You are correct, 8 are required for the CASA tenant space. However, zoning application 3-11 did approve the 7 parking spaces, so there was a deficiency of 1 parking space at the time of approval for CASA.
That was the 2010?
2003.
2003, okay.
And then further amended in 2010.
Okay. Yeah, I watched that 2010 Planning Commission meeting. I found it interesting. What was being asked for was basically to legalize an operation that was currently ongoing without proper approval. I found that interesting. So here's the other question I had about parking for semi-tropic. I understand the table and how the 7 stalls would be sufficient for that. But then you start talking about occupancy and a maximum occupancy of 43. Now I don't follow the math. There could be 43 people in there and there's 6 parking stalls. Tell me how that works.
So the occupancy is a maximum occupancy load set by the building code. It's a maximum. It doesn't necessarily have much to do with how many tables are there, for example, or a relationship to the square footage of the building. Our parking standards are related to the gross floor area of the building and our parking spaces per 1,000 square foot standard.
So even if we had 15 stalls, even if we had 20 stalls and we're over parked as far as the code, we wouldn't have enough for the occupants. And then my natural question is, where will these people park?
So I think your question is connecting the building occupancy, maximum allowable building occupancy with our parking standards, and I don't think that they necessarily relate. I think they're 2 sort of parallel calculations. So my suggestion would be that we look at the parking standards established by the code, and those require 7 parking spaces on the site.
Do we have a condition of approval that relates to, and it might be in there, that relates to requirement that the adjacent residential neighborhoods not be used for patron parking? It's a condition of approval.
It's a condition of approval number 12 on handwritten page 6.
That's excellent. Thank you very much. And then my last question, is the current 1,100 square foot tenant space empty?
Correct, it is vacant.
Thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Perkins.
Thank you very much. When looking at the design plans and seeing the site today, I noticed that on the exterior there was very little lighting, if any. So I wanted to clarify, as a part of the building code process, will the applicants be required to improve lighting in the parking lot and along that ADA pathway? Because that looks like it would be very dark at night.
Yes, we would most likely require a photometric study to make sure there's adequate lighting on site and then there's no excess spillage of the lighting to adjacent properties.
Great, thank you. And then one of the questions for the condition of approval number 18 is we're talking about parking, and this being, I remember reading the applicant letter, the likelihood of people walking and biking from the local neighborhood. I just wanted to check for the condition of approval number 18, it specifies that 2 hoop bike racks will be installed. I want to make it clear, does that restrict them to 2, or is it just saying like minimum 2?
That would be a minimum.
Okay, great. And then I just also wanted to find out, what is the reasoning for requiring a hoop-style rack? Not saying that that's a bad rack. The guidelines in there are very good and clear. I'm just wondering what the reasoning behind that was.
That's a standard condition of approval provided by transportation, but it's my understanding that alternate designs may be approved by public services.
Okay. Great. Thank you.
Okay, anyone else? Okay, I'll open the public hearing and ask the applicant to come forward. There they are. Brought a fan club, too. Doesn't matter. Good evening.
Good evening.
Have you read the staff report, conditions of approval, and do you agree with them?
Yes.
Okay, floor is yours.
All right. Hi, everyone. We are so excited to share with you our presentation for our second business here in the area, Semi-Tropic Wines, which will be Orange County's first and only natural wine bar and shop.
So my name is Kyle Knelly, and this is my partner, Rebecca Manti. We were born and raised in the Costa Mesa area. We moved up to the Bay Area to go to school. I studied at UC Berkeley. Becca studied at the University of San Francisco. After receiving our degrees, we stayed in the area for a little bit, and then we moved down back home to open up our first business, Daydream Surf Shop, which is located just on the border of Costa Mesa and Newport Beach. So currently we are operating it. It is a specialty coffee shop and surf shop. So we're going to touch on that for a little bit.
This is our first business, Daydream Surf Shop. We saw the potential in an empty warehouse and transformed it into a thriving business where we have specialty coffee, a retail space, and as well as a surfboard demo program. Like Kyle mentioned, we are located just on the other side of the Costa Mesa City line in Newport Beach on Monrovia and 16th Street.
So as you can see, similar to the property that is proposed for Semi-Tropic Wines, Daydream Surf Shop was ripe for beautification. It was essentially a vacant warehouse, completely empty, open floor plan, and we breathed new life into it, which we are also looking to do at Semi-Tropic Wines.
So looking at the photos, you could see that what was once an empty storage warehouse is now a beautiful space for our community. In the photos, you can see our collection of handmade surfboards, our coffee bar, as well as other goods made by many local artists and craftspeople. In the photo in the bottom left, you can also see one of our baristas, Jordan, and currently Daydream employs 10 people.
Here are a few more photos of the shop. As Becca mentioned, we employ a lot of vendors that are local in the area. On the top left, you can see some of the makers' products. On the top right and the bottom left, you can see a more zoomed out view of the space and kind of get an overall feeling. We're going for a similar minimal aesthetic that's very nice and clean, and we'll be looking for that same kind of aesthetic in Semi-Tropic Wines. The bottom right-hand photo is the Daydream Research Center board collection. We'll touch on that later because the relationship between the Daydream Research Center surfboard sharing program is similar to how people will be tasting wines they've never had and going to our wine shop and purchasing wines.
So as we mentioned, Daydream is a specialty coffee shop as well as a retail space. We opened 3 years ago in December of 2016. Every day we have hundreds of customers that come and visit us. Just this past month, Food and Wine Magazine, a prestigious culinary publication, released their list of top coffee shops in the country, and our shop was voted to be the 9th best coffee shop in the nation. At Daydream, we choose to support local artists and makers by selling goods that are made here in Costa Mesa. We also have a surfboard demo program that we call our Research Center, where people can sign up for a monthly membership and have access to over 50 different surfboards. We've had people from Japan, France, Australia, and other countries be members of our Research Center. We got the inspiration to open Semi-Tropic Wines from countless customers asking us for recommendations on where they can go enjoy natural wine. We quickly realized that the closest natural wine shop and bar is in Los Angeles.
So here are some photos of Semi-Tropic Wines from the past and today. So it's a beautiful 1960s building. Becca and I have been driving past and biking past this building ever since we moved back home. It's on our route to Daydream, so we drive past it all the time. It's one of our favorite buildings in town, so the fact that it is now ours is absolutely incredible. We tend to keep the 1960s aesthetic of the building and beautify it.
So Semi-Tropic Wines will be Orange County's first and only natural wine bar and shop. We will only be offering wines that are organic, biodynamic, farmed sustainably, and made with no additives. We will also have a retail space for our customers to take a bottle of wine home. We envision our retail space operating similarly to our research center at Daydream, where customers can come in and taste new wines and have the option to take home a bottle. We've received over 600 support letters from community members, neighboring businesses, as well as visitors. We've also signed an 8-year lease with an option to extend. We're planning on being here for a very long time and are trying our best to lay down roots and invest in our community.
So if natural wine is a new topic to anybody here, this is just a brief overview. So first and foremost, natural wine is made with organic grapes. A lot of people don't know this, but there's a list of 75 different ingredients that winemakers can add to wine without disclosing it. There's been tests done at UC Davis and found things such as Roundup in actual bottles of wine. So the first and foremost thing is organic grapes. Secondly is it's farmed biodynamic or sustainably. An example of biodynamic farming would be such that if you have a bug problem with your grapes, instead of spraying chemicals to get rid of the bugs, you would introduce a bird that is a predator of these bugs to take care of that. Some winemakers even go a step further and they dry farm, so they're completely cut off from the water supply altogether. So nothing is added to these wines, no sulfites, preservatives, stabilizers, coloring agents, sugars, or chemicals, which again, a lot of people don't know is added to conventional wine to make them shelf stable and to allow them to travel all over the world. So nothing is added, also nothing is taken away from the wine. So fining agents can also be harmful for people's health. So there are no fining agents used in natural wine. They use native yeast, just yeast that grows on the grapes. They do not inoculate, which some conventional wine producers do when they take yeast from other vineyards and use them for their fermentation. You can kind of summarize this as low intervention winemaking. There's kind of a cool joke, but on some of the back of the labels, it'll say ingredients, grapes. That's what we're going for.
At Semi-Tropic Wines, we will be offering the highest quality of wines from all over the world. The environment of Semi-Tropic Wines will be low-key, romantic, and relaxed. We want to create a space for our community for people to have a mellow and relaxing time. The interior design will be clean, minimal, and modern. The wines that we are offering are inherently at a higher price point. An average glass of wine will be about $15. These natural wines also tend to have a lower alcohol by volume. We have also hired knowledgeable industry professionals who will be helping us curate the customer experience.
So through this process, 3 main concerns have come up. First, as we talked about earlier, was parking, and that also segues into the hours of operation. In addition, there are differences in the ABC licenses that are currently in use in our census tract, and we just want to discuss how we are differentiating ourselves.
So the first issue that we wanted to address is the parking. Because we're operating in under 300 square feet of public space, we only need 5 parking spaces, and the building currently has 6, including the ADA spot. We also expect that our customers will not be driving to come drink at our wine establishment. Our customers will be walking, riding their bikes, utilizing ride-sharing apps like Lyft and Uber, and we also want to incentivize those customers who use those options by offering 10% off for people who arrive via rideshare. There's also no threat to people parking in the nearby neighborhoods because you need a permit on your car to park there anyway.
So the hours of operation due to the parking will be staggered with our neighbor Costa. So we will share the lot before 8 p.m., or excuse me, Semi-Tropic Wines will have the use of the lot before 8 p.m. and Costa will have the use of the lot after 8 p.m. They used to be open, or they had hours that the city has that says that they were open on Sunday earlier, but they're no longer open earlier on Sundays. They're open 8 to 2, 7 days a week. It says on their website as well as Google Maps and anywhere else you'd like to check. So we will be open 7 days a week, 11 a.m. to 8 p.m.
And then the type of alcohol licenses that we're applying for a 20 and a type 42. The 42 is for customers to enjoy a glass of wine on site, and the type 20 is for customers to take an unopened bottle of wine home.
So this is a list of the current active licenses in our census tract. Our neighbor on the right is West End. They have a type 47 license, which is a full liquor bar with food. Casa, our neighbors on the left, are similar but without food. Garibaldi is the same as Casa. El Ranchito is a full liquor bar with food, and 2145 is just beer and wine with food. As you can see, nobody in our census tract has a type 42 license or a type 20 license.
And here's our site map that you guys got to see earlier. You can see where the building is, as well as the parking in the back, and also our bike racks. If we could turn every parking spot into a bike rack, we would.
And here's another drawing of our plans. As you can see, the public area is under 300 square feet, and that is the big kicker for us. That's kind of helping us with all the parking, and we plan to abide by that. Also, just a little bit about the customer experience. You can kind of visualize customers walking through the middle door. They approach the bar where they decide to taste a couple glasses of wine, and then we can discuss with them what bottles they would like to take home.
And then lastly, the beautification that we're proposing to the building. Currently there are 2 non-conforming parking spots that are in the front, and we will be removing those, as well as adding drought-tolerant landscaping, California natives. We will also be adding bike parking. We will be adding an ADA accessible parking spot in the back, because currently there's no ADA parking. We are also proposing a mural as well as sign painting.
And here is a beautiful rendering of semi-tropic wines in the future. You can see our drought-tolerant landscaping in the front, our happy biker on the right, our neighbor Casa in West End. And yes, thank you for your time. We're really looking forward to bringing this to the neighborhood.
Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioners, are there any questions of the applicant? Commissioner Colbert.
This is a great presentation, and thank you for your contribution to the community. Obviously, based off of the presentation you presented tonight, this is going to be a wildly successful business. But my question remains related to the parking that's listed in condition 13. Obviously, this is a challenge, but I want to understand, are you still interested in negotiating or are discussing with the adjacent owners about that additional property? Is that something you all are still pursuing, or is that something that you will stop at this point?
We're still avidly working on that. I mean, ideally, it would be great if we could be open later, and if we secure off-site parking, we'd be allowed to do that. We've had countless discussions with neighboring businesses, and we've been working tirelessly for the last 6 months trying to secure something, and we'll continue to do so.
Okay, and also I just wanted to return back to another question that you spoke to related to rideshare space. I know that Ms. Lee stated that there isn't a space on the street kind of that is designated to this. Given that you have offered this incentive, I didn't have the opportunity to visit the site, but is there enough spacing? This won't create a queuing issue is my question at all in the street, a problem at all?
It will not. So there's right in front of, and you can go by the site, or I even think I saw a couple people pulling it up on Google Maps, and you can see it there too. So there's a red curb in front of our spot. Obviously, it's not a great spot to drop off. Right in front of that, there's a 30-minute spot, and that's always available. Also, if you pull in on the right, or on the, I guess it would be the west side of our building, there's a driveway there, and you can pull in, drop off, turn around, flip out.
And Caitlin, Jennifer, y'all are comfortable with this?
We are, because the rideshare space isn't designated, so any business along that street could, their customers can use Uber, Lyft, or other rideshare companies, and they would be able to park in that 30-minute space and drop off the same as this applicant's customers. It's not a designated space.
Okay, and just hypothetically, if they were to land some type of deal with some business or parking lot, then they would come back to you all, to staff, for approval of that plan?
Yes, that's correct. Conditional use permit is typically required for off-site parking.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Perkins?
Yes, one thing I was wondering about just as a question, I love the discount for people who are using rideshare. Have you considered potentially doing a discount for people who are walking and or biking onto the site to help alleviate parking?
Yeah, that was actually a slight misspeak. It would be basically for anybody that didn't drive.
Okay, perfect. And then also I was thinking for the condition of approval number 13, where you are talking about parking shortages right now, it's worded very broadly where we could include but not limited to, say, changing your hours. Would you be amenable potentially to, say, adding in something like, say, encouraging the use of active or non-personal vehicle transportation to help, again, show that in there? So if there are parking problems, you could explicitly do that. That'd be okay?
Indeed, yeah. We're willing to work with our customers in any difficulties that arise, and we're flexible.
Okay, thank you. That's all.
Okay. Seeing no further questions, thank you for your presentation. We'll open this to public comment. Anybody wishing to speak to this item, please come down to either podium. All at once now. Yes, sir. If I was that podium, I'd be offended tonight.
I'm so sorry. I didn't even see the podium over there.
I'm just fooling with you. That's all right. Go ahead.
My name is Jason Farrell. I'm the current beverage director at Daydream Surf Shop. I came here to speak on behalf of these two great employers that I work for. I also grew up in the area and spent a lot of time here and moved away to the Bay as well. Went to school in UC Santa Cruz, moved to Germany after that, and came back here for a short time, not planning on staying. I had a job offer to move to London, and these wonderful people provided such an excellent space and leadership that I chose to stay here in this community because of them. I'm not the only person that feels that way. The space that these people have created for our community at Daydream Surf Shop is beyond words. I've worked for wonderful companies all around the world. This place is truly something special. It's a place for people to come together that may never have interacted otherwise. People that come here for the craft goods that we provide, the specialty coffee, the surfboards, all of these types of things. Semi-Tropic will be no different. It'll be a place for the community to come together, but it'll also be a place that attracts new people to our community and that puts Costa Mesa on a map of providing something to Orange County and to Southern California that other places are not providing. As you can see, we were voted 9th best specialty coffee shop in the entire country. That's what we're bringing to specialty coffee in the area. You can only imagine what we're going to be bringing in terms of a wine community here as well. Any concerns, especially with that some of you have had with people being drunk and driving and things like that, or biking. Natural wine is not something that people are coming and getting smashed on for the most part. That's not really the intent of it. And I think that those concerns would apply more to a place serving like hard liquor. And yeah, that's about all I have to say. I think that these people are doing something really wonderful for the community, and allowing them another space to do that will just benefit all of us. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak to this item? If you plan on speaking, if you can take this podium or that podium, and then if another person wants to speak, go to the unoccupied so we can kind of move through it pretty quick, because I'm old and I'm getting tired. Yes, sir.
Hi, my name is Eric Kyleman. I'm the entertainment booker at the Wayfair, part ownership there too. And the west side of Costa Mesa is it's up and coming, and we could use all the help we could get on that side of town. We do have a big parking lot too, and I think some people could park over there. I'm not the owner over there, but there's plenty of other strange activities going on in that parking lot that maybe them taking up some of the spots over there could kind of help out a little bit more. But these guys are great people. Their coffee shop's fantastic, and we'd love to have them neighbor us. So thank you guys.
Thank you. Anyone else? Yes.
Hi, my name is Allie Garvin, and I am a local business owner. I own another coffee shop on 19th and Anaheim, so it'd be walking distance, 19th and Pomona. I live on Anaheim, so I get to walk to work, and I opened 7 months ago, and I've seen just so many good things come out of having a local coffee shop in the neighborhood, and so many of my customers, I think, would benefit from having semi-tropic wines down the street. I really admire Becca and Kyle and what they've done, and yeah, I think they're amazing people, and we really need more things like this in Westside, like he was saying. Yeah, I'm excited, and I think a lot of people bike and walk to my shop, and I think theirs would be the same. So, yeah.
Great. Thank you very much. Anyone else? Really, that podium's good. It works. All right.
Hi there. I'm Jason Woodside, and I'm a new transplant to the Costa Mesa area. I used to live in New York for about 20 years, and I have a business, a pretty vibrant cafe business there that does really well. I'm just here in support of my friends that are quite passionate about what they do. It's very clear they have a very good platform for the subculture that's quite special to Costa Mesa, and I'm just here to support them in regards to doing something new and something different. In regards to the parking issue, I find that it's quite an old headspace to say, 2 parking spots, whatever. There's a lot of red tape, I understand, but with the incentive and the rideshare thing, I think it's a bit of a home run. So just hope it works out. So.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, seeing none, I will close the public comment. I'm going to ask the applicant to come up one more time, if you don't mind. Sorry. Bit of a jog.
Should we use this one?
That's fine. You bet.
We'll go either side.
Quick question. Are there any external security cameras on the building right now?
Costa might have an external security camera, and Weston might have a security camera, but we haven't checked with them.
Okay. So I don't want to condition it because I see there's some security measures, but I think it'd be really helpful, particularly for our police department, not that anything happened, if there was security monitoring via camera on the back parking area there. I'm not going to ask to put it in the conditions. I would just ask that you consider that. That'd be helpful for us because ultimately, if something did happen there, it would be good to have that kind of evidence.
I think that's a great idea.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah, we're good. I'm good. Unless you have questions. Anybody else have questions? Okay, Commissioner Colbert.
Just have one question related to the business hours for CASA. I noticed that the applicant stated that the restaurant or bar had been operating, and it was published on their website that they were operating from 8 to 2. So was that something that we captured within this application and learned and decided to group it together, or was that just curious?
Yes, it was captured in this application to address that concern. Although the previous entitlement did allow Costa to open as early as 11, their business practice, they were actually opening at 8 o'clock, so it was mutually beneficial for both tenants in the building.
Okay. Anybody else? Motion made by Vice Chair Harlan. Is there a second? We'll have to read the motion, obviously. Okay, there's a motion. Commissioner Harlan, or Vice Chair Harlan, would you make the motion and then?
Sure. I move that we find the project is categorically exempt from the provisions of the California Environmental Quality Act, per CEQA guidelines sections 15301, existing facilities, and approve planning application 19-21, zoning application 19-90, and zoning application 19-95, ZA-09-42A1, subject to conditions of approval.
Okay, is there a second? Second. All right, and Vice Chair Harlan, I would ask if removal of the code requirement for the second bathroom is part of your motion.
Yes, that's fine.
Okay. You're okay with that, yes. Commissioner Colbert? All right. All right, so motion on the floor and a second. Any comments?
I'll start.
Okay, Vice Chair.
I always end. I prefer to start.
Okay, please.
So what you probably didn't notice is all of us were reaching for our buttons to make this motion at the same time. Pretty close, which is rare. But I think it speaks to the enthusiasm, obviously, that we have for the project. But for me, I've been to Daydream. I love it. It's just a very thoughtfully designed space, well curated wares, and excellent coffee. The fact that it's on the west side is, for a lot of people, a big bonus. But what I like is that I've seen that kind of energy and enthusiasm develop elsewhere in the city. We've got sections on 17th Street and the east side that's opening up shortly. Moon Goat Coffee, also on Placentia. It's just wonderful that we're getting this kind of investment and vitality all around the city. So I am very pleased to support this. I have no doubt that you'll be making great improvements on 19th, which we definitely need.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Anybody else? Commissioner Colbert.
This is a great proposal. I second everything my colleague just stated here. I just want to make one thing. I guess you should give the gentleman a promotion for his great speech. Although London is just a dreary place and the sun is fun over here in California, but those are my comments.
Commissioner Zick.
Vice Chair was accurate, I think, when he said everyone was reaching for their button at the same time. This is pretty exciting, and I would only offer one comment to you, and it's one that I offered to a previous applicant. But this is in a completely different spirit. Get her done.
So, my family, oh, you have something? Okay, Commissioner Perkins, go ahead. Chair usually goes last.
I also wanted to say, again, we're all trying to put the motion button here, so that's perfect. I think your project is going to be fantastic. One of the things I really appreciate about it is the new landscaping in front, which should make the pedestrian experience on the street and biking experience on the street worlds better, incorporating bike racks on it, murals and artwork. I think that's fantastic. It's also a good example of how I think sometimes we need to be careful with our parking requirements, since here we even have a case where we came close to parking getting in the way of approving a fantastic proposal. And so I think we need to be careful with that, since requiring excess parking hinders development and requires us to dedicate excess space to parking lots, which are economically unproductive spaces, and hinders development of local businesses. So thank you for persevering through this process.
Very good. Everybody's getting applause tonight. So, my wife and I moved to Costa Mesa in 1993 with our 4 kids. Actually, we had 2 at that point, but ultimately we wound up with 4. And we were young, like all of you out there, who are, taking risks and investing in the community. And I've had the privilege of serving on commissions in the city from 2003 to today, with a little bit of a break. And I've longed to start seeing that kind of next generation come into the city and start making the city their own. Us old folks have had great ideas over the last 30 years about what Costa Mesa should be, and I think we've kind of laid the groundwork for folks like you to kind of take it to the next level. And I just am thrilled to death to see young applicants like this who are taking risks, who have clearly a community about them that feels the same way about what they want Costa Mesa to be and what they want their neighborhood to be. So I'm just tickled pink that you guys are here and giving it a try, and I think it's a wonderful concept. I'm not concerned about the parking. In fact, it's interesting why you would want to provide more parking spaces at a bar for cars. It's just, well, I've never liked that and I don't like that most jurisdictions have parking requirements by square footage. I'd rather park uses. And I think ultimately we'll get to that in some sections of town. But, these uniform parking requirements per square footage that are citywide don't make any sense anymore. And I think you'll see as we go forward with parking studies and things like that, that we may even have districts or use-oriented parking rather than square footage parking. So anyway, I think you're going to be great. Thank you for coming to Costa Mesa. I appreciate your confidence in the city, and good luck. And I will call
Chair, if I may?
Yes.
I was unclear whether the motion included a modification to condition of approval number 13. Commissioner Perkins originally raised it.
Remind us again, Commissioner Perkins, what that modification was?
That modification was looking at adding an encouragement to improve programs to encourage use of active transportation or non-personal vehicle transportation in the event of parking problems on site. I am not married to that. I think the wording of the motion, the wording of the condition already includes and other possibilities, which would say that. So I would say we are good to go.
Thank you. So no, I think it's implicit in the
Thank you.
in the motion. So, okay, call for the question.
That motion carried. That motion carried 6-0 with Commissioner Torje absent.
Okay, and that decision is final in 7 days unless appealed to the City Council. Good luck, kids. Okay. Do we have any public services report tonight? Ms. Rosales, okay. Development Services report, Mr. Curtis?
Not specifically, Mr. Chair, but my staff and I would like to wish you all happy holidays, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and we'll see you all in January.
Okay. City Attorney report.
Chair, you should have in your binders for tonight's, or in your folders for tonight's evening, the final housing memo of the year from my office.
We appreciate the work that you've done on that. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
So we will stand and wish everyone a Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, Happy New Year, and look forward to our regularly scheduled meeting on January 13th, 2020. Holy smokes. Good night.